Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon. Welcome to another TechStrong TV broadcast. Today is Tuesday, February 16th. I can't believe how quickly this month is flying by. Pretty soon it'll be springtime and the snow will be gone and everybody in the Northeast will be very happy. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we have on today's broadcast. First off, Alan has a conversation with Galem Ko, who is a product manager for Ubuntu Core at Canonical. Canonical just released a major new version of Ubuntu Core for IoT and other devices. So Galem talks with Alan about the new release and what it means for Canonical and Ubuntu and kind of the world of open source. So good stuff there. After that, Alan speaks with Stephen Seiden, who is the CEO and founder of Acquired Data Solutions, which is basically a systems integrator and solution provider based in the DC area, specializing in cybersecurity. Good stuff that the company does, but along the way, Stephen's social responsibility has led him to also help many Washington, DC youths with STEM and STEAM initiatives, which is, as we all know, so important to get the youth involved in science, technology, engineering, math, and arts. And so Stephen talks with Alan about what he's done, what his company has done, and maybe how other organizations should be focusing on underprivileged youth and STEM and STEAM initiatives as well. Great conversation, definitely one worth checking out. After that, we have a conversation between Alan and Jyoti Bansal, who is the CEO and co-founder of Harness. He also was a founder of App Dynamics and also Traceable AI. Well, Jyoti talks about Harness, his latest round of funding. It was $150 million, which puts the company's valuation at $1.77 billion with a B, which makes it one of those unicorn companies. It's amazing and staggering to think about. But Jyoti shares his view of the tech space with Alan and what Harness is doing that makes it such a successful company so far. Great conversation, totally worth checking out. After Alan's conversation with Jyoti, we have another episode, part 2 of our Haunted Hacker podcast featuring, hosted by Mike Jones. This is part 2 of a conversation that he has with Drew Perry, who is the CEO of a company called Tiberium. And of course, they talk all things cybersecurity. It's always a fascinating conversation that Mike has with his guests. So definitely one worth checking out as well. After the Haunted Hacker podcast, we have a latest installment of our CISO Talk. This one is actually moderated by Dr. Zhenxi Wang of Rain Capital. She speaks with Rinki Sethi, who is a CISO of Twitter, as well as Marcia Main, who is a CISO at Rally Health, and Algird P., who is the cybersecurity lead at the World Economic Forum. They talk about security beyond COVID. Never let a crisis go to waste is the motto there. And so they talk about how they are turning COVID into opportunities for innovation and growth. So perhaps there is a silver lining to the dark cloud that is COVID-19. After that, I come on back with the news headlines for the day, and then I have a conversation with Ari Weil, who is the Global VP of Product and Industry Marketing at Akamai. We discuss edge computing in 2021, including some of the best practices and some of the best use cases for edge computing. It's really an interesting conversation that he and I have about edge computing in general, but part of the discussion revolves around why economics actually dictate which data is best managed at the core. So obviously edge computing is a great technology, but it is not for every company. And so Ari and I talk about what some of the things that organizations need to consider when they are considering edge computing. Definitely good conversation. After that, I do the webinars preview for you, letting you know about some of the webinars coming up on Devops.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard that are happening in the next few days and totally worth checking out. So hopefully you can mark your calendar and attend then. After that, I have a conversation with George Burns III. I have no idea if he is related to the real celebrity George Burns, RIP. But this George Burns is Senior Consultant of Cloud Operations at SPR, and he and I talk about technical debt in digital transformation. And as organizations try to make those complex migrations work, tech debt is particularly dangerous. Deployments will most often need to be retooled later on, so that tech debt just grows. Multi-year cloud migration and tech modernization plans are obsolete, he says, and they cannot continue to be the default. And he's got a great point, a great set of points to offer during our conversation. So definitely another great conversation worth checking out. All right, lots and lots of good conversations in today's TechStrong TV broadcast, and we will get things rolling right after these commercial messages. All right, guys, first up, we've got a conversation between Alan and Galen Kao, who is the product manager for Ubuntu Core at Canonical, talking about the latest release of Ubuntu Core for IoT and other devices. Great conversation. Let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another segment here for our TechStrong TV. Our guest for this segment is Galen Kao. Galen is with Canonical. And Galen, I hope I didn't mispronounce your last name. I know we practiced it, and then I went blank. Say it for our audience, just so we get it right.
Galen Kao.
Kao. Very good. Galen, welcome, and thanks for being on TechStrong TV.
Thank you very much for hosting me, Alan. I'm very happy to be here.
It's our pleasure. So, Galen, our audience, of course, knows Canonical, the people behind Ubuntu, and no introduction. Believe it, as we were talking off camera, though, this is the first time we've actually had someone from Canonical on TechStrong TV, which is surprising. We're doing this almost a year, and I know we've covered Ubuntu and Canonical in that time, but whatever. We're glad to have you here. Galen, why don't you give our audience a little bit of your background, though? What do you do at Canonical, and what's your background?
Yes. So, Alan, I'm a product manager for all things IoT at Canonical. I'm IoT product manager, which means I oversee a portfolio of IoT-related products, including Ubuntu Core, which is the product we want to talk about today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know we have a big update with Ubuntu Core, but why don't we start with defining what is exactly Ubuntu Core so our audience kind of knows where we're coming from?
Yes. So most people will know Ubuntu. It's a very popular Linux distribution, especially with developers. Also well represented in the cloud, with over 70% of the clouds running on Ubuntu. But most don't know yet about Ubuntu Core. And what is it? It's still Ubuntu. It's a minimal version of Ubuntu, optimized for IoT. Optimized in the sense that it's fully containerized.
Wow.
Yes, built on containers, making it fully modular and composable. And the benefit is that developers can build very lean images, operating system images that contain only the software packages that they need for an embedded device, which is convenient because IoT devices are mostly constrained in capacity. So it gives the ability to just pick what you need from Ubuntu and embed it on an embedded system, an embedded device. So this is very much what it is. Yeah.
How long has Ubuntu Core been around or available?
It's been available since 2016. The first release was in 2016. We are at our third release now with Ubuntu Core 20 since we release at the same time that we release an LTS.
The full Ubuntu.
Yes. Yeah. So it's our third release right now, 5 years of existence. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, look, I'm old, right? And we used to call similar kinds of things headless. Right, you had headless operating systems for when you were installing in places where you maybe didn't have a screen to do even a command line, let alone a GUI. And of course, they weren't containerized. These headless OSs. Containers existed, but not in the way they do today. So, is this sort of the successor to the old headless operating systems, do you think?
Yes, it's very much in the lineage of all these headless embedded operating systems. Only that we've built it on the principle of cloud native software development. With,
right.
New kind of containers, friendly for CI/CD DevOps practices, very easy to provision on hardware. Meaning, if you want to provision a camera peripheral on a headless device, it's much easier to do with Ubuntu Core. So it's essentially the new generation, the next generation of this kind of operating systems. Yeah.
I love it. That's great. Really good. All right. So the new release is Ubuntu Core 20.
Yes.
And so what's new in the new release then?
Yeah. So we've really put the focus on heightening endpoint security with this release, with 3 key features: secure boot, full disk encryption, and a device recovery mode. These are features that developers that were using Ubuntu Core at scale in the field were asking about in order to raise the bar on security, a bar that's already high. So on secure boot, what it does is that it authenticates the software that boots on a device every time it's turned on, every time it boots.
Really?
It verifies every component in the boot chain, the signatures, to make sure that a threat actor has not changed any software element in that chain. So this is what it does, and we've developed this feature because devices are deployed in a distributed fashion everywhere, and they're not necessarily attended. So it's easy to get physical access to the devices and maybe hijack the software. Secure boot prevents that. The second feature is full disk encryption that I've mentioned. What it does is it encrypts the data that is stored on disk on every device. Again, to protect against physical vulnerabilities that are due to the physical access of the device. It's easy to access the devices physically. So what it does is if you have a critical application like a camera application, for instance, that it's privacy sensitive data is stored on the disk, right? The feature really protects data that is stored on the disk in order to protect the confidentiality of users, of customers. That's the second feature. The third feature is a device recovery system that allows to store desired device configuration in order to easily restore the devices in case there's for whatever reason downtime, maybe due to power losses or anything else, because the conditions in which these devices operate are sometimes rough. A device recovery system with stored configuration makes it very easy to restore devices when there's been an interruption. So these are the three key features that we've introduced in order to heighten the level of security on Ubuntu Core 20. Yeah.
Got it. So this is just great stuff. I mean, a lot of what you've done here is security, for this release anyways, is very security related. But sometimes things, like securing that endpoint, full, data encryption, come with an overhead, right? A hit on overhead. How do you, and these IoT devices don't have that kind of horsepower usually, or many of them. How do you balance that, to not slow things down, but still keep that security?
Yes. So Ubuntu Core right now, where we are, it's focused on devices that have sufficient capability, not on the very constrained devices. So devices that have sufficient capabilities to sustain this kind of workload. But you're right. There's a trade-off, and what we're doing is we're giving options to our users to enable these features, and will depend on the criticality of your application. You can choose to not to activate these features, and prevent this overhead, this additional cost on compute, or to enable this feature if you judge that your workloads needs to be secure. So here we're giving the options to users to decide if they need to secure their workloads, to activate these features to secure their workloads. So it's a choice to make for
absolutely. So Gallum, give us an idea of the kinds of IoT devices where we're seeing Ubuntu Core being deployed. I mean, because there's literally billions and billions of IoT devices. Yes. What are the kinds of ones that are great candidates for Ubuntu Core?
Yeah, so the minimum requirements. So one of the benchmark to be quick is the Raspberry Pi, for instance. Raspberry Pi is kind of a benchmark device for Ubuntu Core or Intel NUCs. So devices that have similar capabilities or more are ideal target for Ubuntu Core. Devices that have less capability are not necessarily great targets for Ubuntu Core. So it's essentially devices built on SOCs with sufficient memory, storage memory, and RAM to power Ubuntu Core. So the minimum requirements is 256 megabytes of memory on disk and 512 megabytes of RAM to run Ubuntu Core. And in terms of use cases, we've seen various type of devices that were built with Ubuntu Core, which is one of an exciting part of this job. We've seen industrial gateways that are built on Ubuntu Core that run in factory, smart city devices. We've seen consumer devices, medical kiosks that were built Ubuntu Core, smart coffee machines that are built with Ubuntu Core. So you see the kind of use cases. They range. They're really reflected in every industry. But what they have in common is the level of intelligence that they want to embed on devices. Generally, our users, customers, developers have picked Ubuntu Core when they really wanted to make very secure, but also very smart devices with a lot of functionality, with rich functionalities. This is where it fits, and it will require adequate hardware to power this kind of intelligence.
Got it. Many years ago, company I had co-founded was working with the U.S. Geological Survey, for instance, and they have all these seismic sensors like in the bottom of the ocean to monitor underground earthquake and stuff like that. And back then they were very limited in their compute capability, so it was hard to put security on there. It was hard to do a lot of things. But today, quite frankly, 256 megs, 512 meg storage, I mean, that's literally a pinhead, right? It's incredible how we've shrunk that. Medical devices, I think, are a no-brainer, as you mentioned. Let me bring up another use case here, though. I'm down in Florida, and we had some news here yesterday that some city, I think more north of us in Florida, someone broke into a computer system that puts chemicals into the water, the local water system. And thank God, I don't think, well, they say it didn't succeed. Who knows? But again, it reminds us of our critical infrastructure, like a water or an electric grid, etc., and how vulnerable they are. And they're all, basically run with IoT and computer devices, right? Having this kind of security is critical. I mean, no pun intended. It's important to safeguard this stuff.
Yes. Absolutely, and that's what is really different with IoT, is that it's integrated into the physical world, and vulnerabilities can have real consequences, and therefore security is really crucial, right?
Yeah,
and this is why we're focusing so much on security on Ubuntu Core. With every release, you will see something new with security, because we understand that it's a real priority. And one thing that is also important with Ubuntu Core is that we commit to updating, pushing security updates, kernel patches, bug fixes for up to 10 years for any device that runs Ubuntu Core, which is an important commitment because the vulnerabilities can be discovered at any stage of the life cycle of the product, and it's important to have a vendor that supports the operating system over the long term and it can fix these vulnerabilities right quick before a threat actor can take advantage of such vulnerabilities and maybe like pollute water, in a critical infrastructure, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. You mentioned 10 years. And so one of the nice things about Ubuntu is there's multiple release, right? There's the one that is good for 10 years and it only gets updated once a year or whatever. And then there's the rapid, and I forget the names off the top of my head now of the different releases. Is there a similar thing with Core, or it really just goes to the major, like, long-term release? You don't have a fast release version of it.
So Core is always a long-term right. supported release.
That makes sense.
Yeah, which totally makes sense. And what we also offer, we have a security team that monitors vulnerabilities as they emerge. And we push updates immediately as we discover them for any device, because we know the places they run in. We want to make sure that they're always up to date in terms of security.
Absolutely. Gallup, this is available now, Ubuntu Core 20?
Yes, it's been released last week. Yeah.
Where can people download it or find out more information?
On ubuntu.com/core. There's a link to download to try it out. It's free and it's open source.
As is Ubuntu. That's one of the great things about Ubuntu, right?
Yes.
Fantastic. We're about out of time, but Gallum, I want to thank you for coming on today and sharing with us this news, and keep up the great work. Unfortunately, the bad people never miss an opportunity to take advantage of a crisis, or to take advantage of an opportunity like that. And I think it's going to be more and more important that our IoT devices are locked down better and have better security built in. So keep up the great work, man. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Gallum Kao from Canonical, talking to us about Ubuntu Core 20 for IoT today. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, next up we have Steven Seiden, who is the CEO and founder of Acquired Data Solutions. He and Alan have a conversation about social responsibility with his organization, and how that has led him and his organization to work with Washington, D.C. youths in STEM and STEAM initiatives. Definitely a conversation that maybe other organizations want to take to heart as well. Great conversation. Let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on another segment for TechStrong TV. My guest this segment is Steven Seiden from Acquired Data Solutions. Steven's right here in Florida with me. He's a little bit upstate in Ocala, the land of horses, just maybe 2-3 hours north of me here. But through the magic of virtual, he's here with me. Hey, Steven, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, Alan.
It's our pleasure to have you here, Steven. Steven, we've not covered Acquired Data Solutions before, not just on TechStrong TV, but I don't think on any of our publications or anything. So if you don't mind, why don't we start there? Why not, a little level set. What's Acquired Data Solutions? What do you guys do? What are you about?
Great, thanks. So Acquired Data Solutions started 23 years ago, and I started out of graduate school. So I've had the pleasure never to work for anybody else in my life, which is both a blessing and a curse. So everything I've learned has been on my own dime, and it's been quite a struggle. So I was fortunate enough, I have a computer science undergrad and 2 engineering masters. So I was fortunate enough to learn a technology that I could leverage straight out of graduate school. And I went to contract with a company, and 3 weeks after I got there, the guy told me he was leaving, either take over the company or get a job. So 3 weeks out of graduate school, I was handed the keys to a company that I've been running ever since. And we started out in tech and really always doing technology solutions. So we were doing product development and product testing. We started as a test and measurement company because most products were test and measurement. Washing machines, dishwashers, phones, cars, they were all test and measurement products. Now they're all IoT products. So we've had to move from test and measurement into the cybersecurity world. So our customers have brought us into cybersecurity because all this technology now needs to be secure. It just can't, all of a sudden now your washing machine can flood your house because somebody hacks it. There's so many ways to get hacked now that product security has to be part of that life cycle of product development. And that's where we're focused.
Excellent, man. And geography-wise, you're all nationwide, or is it a very focused?
We've been primarily focused in the DC government area of DC, but there's not a lot of tech there. So we are branched out to places in Texas, places in Boston, places in Florida, and really working for large system integrators like the Northrop Grumman's, the Leidos, the Mantecs, the SEICs. They have been our primary customer base.
Yep. One of the companies I had co-founded 2001, about 60%, 50% of our business was Fed, and similar kind of thing. I go to DC once a week or once a month, spend a week a month in DC visiting, and then you have to go to all the locations where we had a lot of DoD stuff. So I was in San Diego and Newport, Virginia Beach, and then, a bunch of Army bases and just all over the place. I know that world. I would imagine, though, 2020 was a little different with COVID in terms of traveling and doing this kind of work. How did you guys fare through this whole COVID mess?
It's funny because we've added more staff in 2020 than ever before. But we also lost staff. We unfortunately had 2 of our key personnel die in May. So that took a lot of wind out of our sails. So we had.
Was that from COVID?
So they both went to the hospital with chest pains in May and never came out. So it's unclear if it was COVID, but there was a lot of things that people didn't know about COVID at that time. And we don't know what happened. I talked to my one COO at 10 p.m. on May 20th, and he was dead at 7 a.m. May 21st. So
oh my God.
It was like crazy.
I'm sorry for your losses. Yeah, that's terrible. Is right. Look,
So-
it's touched everyone at this point.
Absolutely. 2020 is a year like of shared suffering that we haven't had in a long, long time.
Oh, I tell people this, you know what? Our children's children will read books about this year, COVID time, and just the suffering and the heartache and the loss. I mean, both people dying economically, everything else. I mean, in one regard, like you, we're lucky in that being part of the digital transformation universe, there's work for us, right? Getting work isn't the problem. Hiring people almost is, and we're going to get into that in a moment. But, but money's not everything, as your grandmother always told you, right? And, the loss, the toll of humanity is just terrible. But we talked about hiring people, Stephen. One of the biggest challenges I know many of our friends in tech have is finding qualified people. Finding people. I mean, there's something like 1 million. Last time I looked, 1 million security jobs open for qualified people with security backgrounds. DevOps engineers, SREs, take your pick. We don't have enough good people. And one of the reasons that we don't is that let's face it, our workforce within that tech world are predominantly white males or Southeast Asian folks who maybe immigrated here, or are here on some sort of visa or something. And nothing the matter with that. I'm all for it. We need those talents. But I know this is something near and dear to kind of where you are, and you're doing something about it, which is great. Why don't you share with us a bit?
Sure. So I grew up in the DC area, and actually we live on Capitol Hill. So we've had the fortunate enough to have our mail protected by the National Guard over the last month or so. So it's been an interesting time to live on the Hill. But through that, I've grown up there with the aspiration to help close the digital divide. So when I started my business, I went and joined a nonprofit called Bite Back that their whole mission was to close the digital divide through teaching them STEM literacy skills, office skills, how to take people and get them back to work. And Bite Back's been a thriving organization. I was lucky enough to be board chair of that for a little while. And then I moved over to youth, because I think STEM literacy is a huge part of youth education. And for the past 5 summers, we have taught inner city kids from DC STEM literacy programs in robotics, in hands-on type situations. This past summer, there was no hands-on learning. So we took on 40 kids virtually and taught them something not STEM and not STEAM. STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. We changed that to team, same letters, because I asked my daughter, what's going on? What do we need to do in March to make it so kids could have jobs, if they ever went back to school? And they said, well, we don't talk about economy. We don't talk about finance. We don't talk about these things that help people. So we created this thing called Teams, which is technology, economics, arts, marketing, and socializing. And we really spent 6 weeks this past summer teaching kids how to market themselves, socialize, and understand economy. And we're doing that again this summer. So one of ADS's biggest goals has always been their give back and their corporate social responsibility. So we've spent a lot of time mentoring kids. We just this week brought on 3 apprentices. So 3 DC high school kids that are going to work with us for at least a year, maybe 3, learning how to do the business, learning how to do business development, learning how to do technology, and really get into the business so that they are skilled in what business looks like. Because a lot of technical people, as we know, are great technical, but you put them in a sales meeting, or you put them in a situation where they have to negotiate or understand things, and they have some experience gaps that need to be closed. So we think that there's a great way with high school kids to do that. And what we're doing now is teaching something called Mastery, which is mindset, art, storytelling, technology, economy, reflection, and you. So Mastery is STEAM plus an R and a Y, the reflection and you piece. And I learned so much in my business that if I did not have self-compassion, or if I didn't meditate and I didn't know how I was showing up, I was completely in my way, tripping all over myself. And like I said, I started my business out of graduate school, so I didn't get corporate training. I didn't get all the things that people get. I didn't get fired or laid off because I did a bad job. I didn't get any of that would actually streamline potentially how I show up. Right. And showing up is really important.
I don't know if look, there's the school of hard knocks, right? Mm-hmm. And there's life lessons we all learn. Yeah. And I never really worked for a big corporation. I worked for, startups that went public kind of thing. And we did that corporate training thing. And I'll be really honest with you. Some of the sensitivity stuff was good looking back at it. But in terms of the kinds of things you're talking about, I don't really think you learn it in there. I think you learn, they say, was it youth is wasted on the young? There are lessons that you just, when you're 35, you don't get it. Even when I think women mature faster than men, but most men, I think it takes us till we're 40 to really figure out, at least, right? To really figure out and to be empathetic and to understand that there is some. I talk about this with my wife. I actually was talking about with someone in the office here earlier today, that how the environment you're coming up from determines so much about what you think your ceiling is, right? How high you can fly, and what you're willing to accept. It's I haven't announced it, but we're going to be announcing it here locally. We're doing a new scholarship program for diversity for people who want to become software engineers, right? DevOps and all that kind of stuff. Security, cybersecurity. And we're going to be picking 2 people a year. It's not announced yet, so I don't want to tell you more. But I agree with you 150%. This is where we need to be putting resources. You know what else was an eye-opener for me, Stephen? When both my boys are in college now. But about 7 years ago, my oldest one went to the local high school by my house. And they had an area of concentration, they call it, in technology. And my son told the teacher that his dad was in tech. So the teacher asked me to come up and be on there. I think it's called their CAM or something, like their advisory board to what they're teaching. And I you know what? I was eager to. I went and I sat in on this, and I realized their aim was that after graduating 4 years of high school in this area of concentration, they would be certified in Microsoft Office. Mm-hmm. I said to myself, "What? That should have been the first semester of freshman year. What else are you doing?"
Yep.
Right? Is that you think these people are equipped for a job because they're certified in Microsoft Office? And well, the man asked me, "Well, what else would you like to see us teach?" I gave him a list.
Exactly.
The very least, with 7 years ago, I'd like to see him learn a little PHP or Python would be nice, HTML. I'm not crazy, right? There's more to cybersecurity than antivirus, maybe. And they say, "Well, we don't really have that. Our teachers aren't qualified to teach that. We don't have the money for it. That's beyond what we can do here." Yeah. And that's when I realized, is it any wonder that we're not turning out qualified people for all these jobs that are out there that are good paying jobs, $15 an hour minimum wage or whatever, right? They're good paying jobs, but they don't have the skill sets, these kids.
And one of the great things that I'm really proud of is that we have a ton of diversity at ADS. We have women engineers, we have minority engineers, we have kids in college right now of people of color. Where the 3 apprenticeships that we just hired, 2 are Latinx and one is African American. So
that's what it's about.
And so we are one of the things we're doing right now is we have one of the first 50 assessors team with us for CMMC. So we're doing a bunch of stuff in CMMC. Leighton Johnson was just interviewed on our behalf yesterday by Federal News Magazine. So we're getting out there in different medias like this, talking about, the question they asked him is what they should be doing for CMMC now. And there's an article coming out in the next week or so on that. So we're really trying to get in front of some of these issues for both cybersecurity and equality and social justice. One of the things I'm doing right now is I'm part of a group called Leadership Greater Washington, which they have these leadership groups all over the country for different things. I'm sure there's Leadership Miami or whatever that was. But we're having a 6-week course in racial diversity right now for people of all walks of life coming into this on a virtual platform, being led and talking about all these underlying issues that people that look like you and I don't always get.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that people that you and I just take for granted because we look a certain way that we have no idea. I didn't really understand white privilege until I was 30 years old. And so there's a lot of things.
And a lot of people still don't. There's a lot of people who still don't. But you want to? It's white privilege, but it's not just white and black. I could show you plenty of poor white kids.
Oh yeah, right.
Who are, again, dealt from the bottom of the deck that just don't have access to the things that maybe my kids did or your daughter does. They don't. And as a result, they're fighting for those $15 an hour jobs.
And I agree with you. I think there's more problem in rural America than in urban America.
Absolutely. You go up to Ocala. Yeah. I mean, look, there are a lot of rich people in Ocala. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But, you go right outside there. And I've been up there. Both my boys are in Gainesville.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough.
There's not a lot in Ocala. So this program we do in Washington, D.C., right? The D.C. government pays the high school kids to come intern for me. So that the kids are paid for. And in DC, if you have a certain GPA, they're sending you to college. There's so many people that are disenfranchised.
We need these things
in the rural world. If you talk to anybody who talks to me, they're going to tell you that my passion is rural America, because I believe that we need brain and hand jobs, not back and hand jobs.
Right.
And in a lot of rural America, we still have back and hand jobs.
Yeah.
And we have to get to brain and hand jobs.
Yeah.
Because the other stuff's going away.
It is. And people got to get to wrap their hands around that. Stephen, we're about out of time, but you know what we didn't do? Acquired Data Solutions. For people who want to find out more, where do they go?
They go to our website, acquireddata.com. So that's ACQUIREDATA.com. So just a single D to find out more information about us. And you can learn anything you want about us. There's an info page, there's a contact us page, and we'd certainly love to hear from any of your audience.
Absolutely. Stephen, thanks for being on today. Keep up the great work. Come back and visit us again. Give us an update.
Yeah, that'd be great. I really appreciate it, Alan. And I get to do something really cool in Ocala that I never did before, that I get to take your job. So there was a rugby team I ran across, and they wanted me to play. And I said, I'm 53, I can't play. And they said, how about you announce? So I'm going to announce my first rugby game on Saturday.
Very cool. Hey, man, send us the tape. So you got to put it on YouTube, because I put some of mine. I used to coach football, and I put, the kids were much younger, but some of their plays and stuff are up on YouTube. You look back on it a few years later, and it's good times.
Yeah.
Good luck with it. Rugby's a great game too.
I came to
for rugby, nonetheless. Ocala, the rugby capital of Florida.
Exactly.
All right, Stephen, I'll be in touch. Thank you very much, Steve Seiden, Unacquired Data Solutions here on TechStrong TV. We'll be going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with another guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind Devops.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we have a conversation between Jyoti Bansal, CEO of Harness, and Alan. They talk about Harness's latest round of funding, $150 million, which puts it at $1.77 billion valuation, making it a unicorn. So Jyoti and Alan talk about the tech space in general and what Harness is doing so well to make it so successful. Let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. My guest this segment is my friend Jyoti Bansal. And Jyoti, I always mispronounce your last name. I'm going to ask you to pronounce it correctly.
Jyoti Bansal.
Bansal. And you know what? You may not know Jyoti Bansal, or you may know Jyoti Bansal, but you know the companies that he has helped found here. He's been a prolific serial entrepreneur with a tremendous amount of success. Jyoti, of course, was the founder of AppDynamics, AppD, which was sold to Cisco. I guess it was 4 years ago, Jyoti. Is that about right?
It was about
4 or 5. Yeah. For a substantial amount of money. Jyoti then kind of set up his own little incubator or accelerator or whatever you want to call it. And some of the fruits of that project are we're going to be talking about today, primarily Harness, one of the up-and-comers in what we used to call the CI/CD space, but I now call it, just deployment. Traceable AI, a new entry, or fairly new in security and cyber, and more he's going to tell us about. Jyoti, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here again.
My pleasure. So, Jyoti, let's take care of the news at hand, and that's around Harness today, right? Harness announced, and it was, I think, a week or two ago, right? A substantial round of of venture capital.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I mean, well, you tell the story, not me. It's your story.
Sure. Yeah. So,
tell us.
Harness announced $150 million of financing at $1.7 billion valuation. And financing was led by a group of really great investors that we are excited to have in the company.
So who would these investors
The
be?
investors, Elkion Capital, Battery Ventures, City Ventures, Norwest, and Thomwest Ventures.
That's great. Those are some real blue chip folks. I've dealt with the battery people years and years, and that's great. Congratulations. So, first of all, 1.77 billion makes it a member of the Unicorn Club, as we say. Of course, Jody, the Unicorn Club now isn't what it was when App Dynamics was a unicorn, right? But nevertheless, it's still it's something worthy of recognition. I mean, it's not, when I was founding companies and raising venture money, a mentor, actually, so Brad Feld was a big part of my work in that, and his mentor, Len Fassler, who bought Brad's first company, Feld Technologies, said to me, he said, you know what, anytime you could get someone to whip out their checkbook and write a check for millions of dollars, it's an amazing accomplishment. For you, Jody, I mean, it's commonplace, but it's still an amazing accomplishment.
Thanks for saying that. But, the way I look at this is, raising capital is not I don't consider it an accomplishment as such. It's really what we do with the capital is accomplishment, right? So
you betcha.
It's just a means to do something, right? So yes, sometimes in the world of startups and venture capital, people get too spun up about, when I see someone's resume and they say their accomplishment is they raised this much capital. Is that not really an accomplishment? What did you do with it is really the accomplishment, right? So
right. How did you work it?
Yes. What we are proud of at Harness is what we are really able to accomplish. We started Harness with this goal, that software delivery, CI/CD, everyone is trying to do it, but it's still completely fundamentally broken. I never met anyone who was happy with it. When I was at AppDynamics, we were doing our own internal CI/CD and we were completely unhappy with it. Everyone thought it always sucked. Any customer of Harness or AppDynamics I talked to, no one was good at it. People were like, we want to deliver code every day or a few times a day, but no one was really there. And it was so complex and so messy and so broken, right? So that's where we said, can we solve this problem? Can we rethink this problem and try to solve this, right? So, and what I'm really excited about is how well we have been able to build a really good product and solution in the market to do that. We kind of rethought the problem from completely from ground up on how this should be solved. And we are seeing that the industry is responding to it. We are getting a lot of traction. We have massive revenue growth last year. We are looking at another major growth here, and the investors are coming in because that's what they are excited about, right? So that to me is the big accomplishment.
Absolutely, and I'll be honest with you. Our audience, Jody, tends to be very technical. Right, 60% practitioner, 30% managers or above, but technical. And they say, congratulations, it's a lot of money. What does it mean for them? What's Harness going to do to make my software deployment job easier? How's it going to solve the problems I deal with every day? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I think that is exactly the right question. So we at Harness, our goal is that can we take any software engineering organization and give them the same level of sophisticated software delivery tools that say a Google or a Facebook or Amazon or that these kind of companies would have, right? And can we take you there in a matter of weeks or months, that your software engineering, software delivery practices could be as good because you have the right tools, right? So when we look at at Harness, we started with our CD product, which is because we thought that was the first major problem you have to solve. People were struggling with continuous delivery and people were putting CI and CD into one bucket, and everyone was trying to do CD on top of Jenkins, and it really didn't work. You're writing custom plugins and hundreds and hundreds of different scripts, and everything was kind of broken. So we said, okay, we have to build a first class CD solution, which is how do you build continuous delivery pipelines that work very well? How can you make things like canary deployments? For people to do canary deployments could take 3 months to set it up. Can we bring it down to like an hour? Like, it's just there in the system that in an hour you can get there, And so big part of the innovation that we had to bring to the market was, how do we bring intelligence into this thing? Because it's like, say, if you're doing like reliable software delivery, continuous delivery, we have to make sure nothing breaks. That's the hardest part to do, right? So how do you make sure nothing breaks? Is like, so we brought in a lot of innovation around, like, can we bring in data from your monitoring systems, your logging systems, your testing systems? Can we understand, build a layer of ML on what is a normal behavior of everything that happens in your software? And when you're doing through a CD pipeline, if something changes in the normal behavior, you either stop propagation in the pipeline, or you roll back, or you kind of slow. Like, so entire management of a CD pipeline has to be around, how do you make sure nothing breaks? And you have to create an intelligent system around it. So to all practitioners of software delivery here, that's what we bring in. That's what Harness brings in. But the thing that what this funding brings to them for, from Harness perspective, is that we are very heavily investing in expanding our platform. So we started with CD, and we have an amazing product on CD. But we also looked at, okay, there are all these related pains around it that people are also struggling with, right? That's the second area that we took on last year that we are expanding in, is actually understanding and managing cloud costs. Like, you have all of these cloud cost management products and technologies, right? But if you still look at the data point, almost everyone thinks about 50 to 60% of the cloud cost is waste that they're spending, So, and when we did the analysis, what we found was the cloud cost is waste because it's not part of the DevOps and CI/CD cycle. Like, you need the cloud cost management and visibility is given to your executives or some finance people, and now they go to the developers and DevOps people and say, hey, your bill is too high, do something about it. But instead of that, we are completely changing it to this concept we call continuous efficiency. That's a new module that we launched, which is, how do you bring the cloud cost and efficiency in the hands of developers and DevOps, that they can manage it and they can understand it while they are doing things, deploying new things. So you can manage the cloud cost and you can bring it down like 40, 50, 60%, right? So that's like a new innovation from us. Then we are the third module that we started launching is actually CI. When we started with this, we'll focus on the CD side of things, and we'll integrate with everything CI. But we strongly believe that even CI needs next generation of innovation. Like, Jenkins is still the dominant CI. It's just like probably 90% of the market share, and it was built like almost 20 years ago. And it's like, there's no, and a lot of the new CI products are really better experiences on top of it, but still hasn't been fundamental new innovation in CI as well. So we are on the path of rethinking from ground up what a next generation CI could look like. How do you bring the right intelligence into CI as well? Can you really reduce the build times? Can you really reduce the test times? Can you be much more efficient about it? So to me, like, that's where we take this funding to bring these innovations to the CI/CD dev software delivery practitioners here, and that's what it means to them.
Absolutely. I'm reminded back to when I first started Devops.com 7-8 years ago. AppDynamics was one of our first sponsors. At that point, CI was a world unto itself. Mm-hmm. There was CI. Jenkins was a CI tool. There was Circle CI. There were Team CI. There were CI products, and then within a year or two after that, it became CD. But it was never a standalone CD for the most part. It was like an appendage, CI/CD. Mm-hmm. You didn't say CD without CI preceding it, right? It was always CI/CD, CI/CD.
That was a big mistake that happened in the industry, in the DevOps industry, because people, trying to put them in one bucket, people forgot, they're almost completely two different use cases. Like, CI is about that your code is constantly being merged and built and tested there. And CD is about that you're delivering it to your end users. Delivering it to end users is a much more complex process. Your security comes in, and governance comes in, and reliability comes in, and you have to make sure, if something goes wrong, you can roll it back. You can do phased rollouts like canary deployments and blue-green deployments, and all of those parts are like, it's a different problem. So what happened by people putting CI and CD into one word, like CI/CD, that people thought, I can take CI and I can use it for CD, which is what people tried, and everyone failed miserably trying to do it.
Absolutely. Two things on that, though. Number one is it gave the established players in the CI market, Jenkins, for instance, a real leg up in this new CI CI/CD market. Because if you're already using Jenkins for CI, you're going to continue using it for CI/CD. Number two, and really this didn't happen until the last year, is this tremendous move to the cloud and the dominance of Kubernetes. Those two things, and of course COVID, as a factor in that. But those two things have really, put this whole market on its head. It spun it around, where just because you use something for CI and CI/CD pre-Kubernetes, pre-cloud, dominance, that doesn't get you where you need to be today, right? So we see things like GitOps and go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, and as you said, like 2020 was a sort of a interesting year. Like it was very hard with the pandemic, everything. But when it comes to the software engineering world, it put this fire that people have to transform really fast. Like most businesses just have to transform to their digital journey faster than they thought. Move to the cloud, move to Kubernetes, move to microservices, move to faster. You have to deliver fast. And to deliver fast, you really need to excel in your CI/CD now, right? So, I think that's where a lot of this new wave of innovation and also a lot of demand that has just completely accelerated in this space, in the last year or so.
Absolutely. So, Jody, one of the big things we're hearing is GitOps, right? Is GitOps the new DevOps? Is GitOps the new CD, right? Because we're deploying right out of Git and we're working within Git and sending it up, works with native. What's your view on that?
Yeah, definitely. I do think GitOps is a very interesting and exciting way of doing it. At Harness, we completely have embraced it. We were among the first few companies to do that. But GitOps, sometimes people misunderstand what does it mean, because there are multiple facets to it. Like one is that people want to build their pipelines, their CI/CD pipelines as code, the way they will write their code in their normal source code, and they normally you will go through you're using a Git repo, you're going through a PR process and a merge process, and everything that you do as a developer for your source code, you want to do for your CI/CD pipelines and configurations, right? So the pipeline as code. So that's one element of GitOps. The second element of GitOps is instead of deploying to say the Kubernetes state directly, can you deploy where you manage the state of Kubernetes inside a Git repo as well, and kind of you make changes there, and then it syncs to the flux operators and things like that, right? So that's I would say that is also another exciting thing. It works in some companies quite well, but I would say still early on the adoption of it. Like the pipeline as code, everyone wants, that's how developers want to operate. Using your Kubernetes state inside your Git repos, it's still early on the adoption, but I do think that we'll see more and more of that. Now the third part comes in, can you do deployment as the way you will commit code, to instead of pressing a button somewhere, or you do it much more programmatically. That is, everyone wants to do it, and that is happening, and that it's all automated. Like we look at Harness, out of all our customer base, only about 20% of our pipelines, someone is manually trigger a pipeline. 80% is automated. It's automated through you commit your code in Git, how people do with Harness is you commit your code in Git, and we will get an event, and that event will trigger the pipeline automatically, right? So that becomes your GitOps approach of instead of you going and manually clicking somewhere and doing something, it's all automated, through your Git actions.
Absolutely. We did a Devops Unbound is a video series we work on, and we had one on GitOps. I think it's actually playing this week. Look, GitOps brings, as you said, it brings a lot of good things, but it's not a panacea, and it's not quite full. I wouldn't say it's fully baked yet, right? There's a lot of rough edges here that are going to need to be figured out and engineered. But
I think when it is what deployments, the number one thing that people miss out in many of these things, in my mind, is the implications towards security and governance. If you go into say you are a large bank with your online banking site, and you say the goal of CI/CD and CD is that developers can ship code 5 times a day in there. So GitOps or not, you have to solve the concerns of security and governance. It's practically impossible for as a business to allow developers to ship code 5 times a day there constantly unless you solve security and governance issues, right? So that's how we look at it. Like, things have to, I do think GitOps also have to mature towards that. Like, how do you bring in the security governance implications embedded into it?
Absolutely. Jody, I want to pivot. You're familiar. Congratulations on Harness. People say, my goodness, look at this young man. Started App Dynamics, had a very successful run there, opened up this sort of incubator kind of thing where he could incubate his own projects. Harness is probably the first fruit of that. Traceable AI, another company I think you're still CEO, right, of Traceable. Up and comer in the cyber world and how all of this fits together, right? I'm blessed to know several very successful serial entrepreneurs in my life. It's not that they're better people or that they work harder. Everyone works hard. But what do you, to our audience out here, what's the key to your success? What do you what do you look for? What's your vision? How do you make this happen?
It's a really good question. I really don't think there is any secret formula that I have or anything, or even a secret strength I have. I think what I like to do is to solve a problem that I'm passionate about and really, really obsess with building the best product to do that. So that was what we did in App Dynamics. Like, I started App Dynamics because I was a software engineer, and I was like, okay, these complex distributed systems you're building, they're so hard to troubleshoot when something goes wrong. Like, how do you even know, it's a performance slowdown, how do you troubleshoot it? And the products were not good enough. So to me, the passion was that, can we build a product that will, solve this problem, and will become the best product in the market to do that? And you just obsess with making the best product, right? Same thing with Harness. When we look at, like, the reason I started Harness was that it's just this problem of everyone wants to do continuous delivery, like deploy code every day. And, it's so hard to do it reliably. Like, very few people are being able to solve this. So can we solve this problem and build the best product, right? So for me, the success is really like, I want to solve problems. Like, and for some people, this might be boring things. Like, people are like, after App Dynamics, when I started Harness doing CD, people are like, you could start any company. Like, why are you focused on CD? That's like a boring thing. Maybe it's boring for you, but that's something I'm interested and passionate about. And like, it's a pain that I've observed, and I think it has to be solved. And like, someone should solve this. And, when I look at, like, my next company, Traceable, that I started, is around application and API security, which I feel is an unsolved problem, and there's a lot of struggle there. And I've felt it myself, and I want to solve it and build the best product in there, right? So a lot of it to me is like, and anyone listening here, my advice to them is like, work on problems that you're passionate about solving a problem. That makes it all much easier. And then you focus on building the best product. Like, and to me, like, if you build the best products, everything becomes easy. Obviously, that's not the only part of building a business. You have to focus on, like, selling, marketing, all the business elements of things equally well as well. But the core of it is like, pick the problem you're passionate about and try to build the best product to solve it.
Excellent advice. One last thing, and then I'm going to let you go if it's okay. So when you focus in on these problems as you see them, right? Managing an application, deploying security. At some point, all of these point products, all these point problems have to play into a world vision, right? What's Jody's world vision of what is the software of tomorrow, right? And the development, deployment, monitoring, managing of it. What is how should it work, right? What's your vision of that perfect world?
I think the perfect world, and I think where the world will go is like, software will be broken into smaller and smaller reusable parts. Like, when people are doing microservices or serverless functions, they are using them inside their companies, like, to compose software. But where the world is going is that it will be used outside of their companies as well. Like, it's like, so like anyone, you see the concept of like, no code, and like, anyone could become a developer. It will happen. Like, but the way it will happen is like, say if someone has to build an app to do something, you find like, 100 different pieces of software that someone has written, and you kind of compose them together. But those 100 pieces of software are also composed of probably another 1,000 pieces of software that they have composed together, right? So, and right now people are doing this with microservices and serverless functions mostly inside their companies, and then you expose some APIs and people bring them together. But I do think where the world is going, that everything will be like this kind of, composed with components exposed through APIs and all, right? But so now from a tooling perspective, what you need to do is that you have to make sure that each of these different components could be monitored, like, properly. The interactions of them could be monitored. Same thing applies to the deployment and delivery perspective. Like, each of these, like, how do you independently deploy them? How do you make sure that the interactions of them work once you deploy them? Same thing applies from a security perspective. Like, you have to look at, like, you have so many moving parts, like, in many ways, like when people used to write like one monolith piece of code running in like one mainframe, it was easy to monitor, deploy, secure all of that thing, right? But now when you kind of break it into thousands of parts, those challenges become harder. But that is the only path though. Like, you have to break it into thousands of different parts that can all come together, because that creates so much velocity inside your company, but velocity for the whole world, right? Like, now it's like anyone in the world can build up, like, if you want to build an e-commerce system, you don't have to write like millions of lines of code. You can find like 100 different pieces that you need, and you can assemble them together, and you have your e-commerce app and site running like in 3 days. Like, and the hundreds of pieces are also composed through lots of other pieces, right? That's where the world has to go, because it creates the innovation velocity for the entire world, and everyone, it increases. But for this to work, you need to solve the monitoring, deployment, security, all of those tooling challenges for around that. And that's, those will be interesting problems to solve.
But those are the enablers of that world of tomorrow. Hey, I kept you much longer than I've asked. I apologize. But it was a great conversation. I wanted people to hear it. Congratulations to not only to you, but to the whole Harness team, right? It's quite frankly, yeah, you're the CEO, visionary, but there's a lot of people working really hard at Harness. I know I interact with them a lot. So congratulations to you all. We are looking eagerly to see what comes out of this. Keep doing what you do, man. Come back and see us soon, okay?
All right, sounds good. Thanks, and great conversation today. Bye.
Thank you. Jyoti Bansal, CEO of Traceable, founder of Harness, App Dynamics. Hear about Harness joining the Unicorn Club. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with another guest in a minute.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Right now, we've got the Haunted Hacker podcast. This is part 2 of a conversation that host Mike Jones has with Drew Perry, who is the CEO of Tiberium. Great conversation. Let's give it a listen.
Trying to eliminate a SOC. No, I don't know about that.
Yeah, from what I gather, it sounds like you're really just taking the kind of mundane daily tasks that a SOC analyst would typically do, and then so that they can focus on other things, right?
Yeah, and it's leveraging the capabilities now with things like Power Automate and sort of the low code revolution that's ongoing. Everything's just blocks, everything's just logic chains, and the more sophisticated logic chains you can create, the more streamlined your processes, the more freed up times you have to focus on the proactive threat hunting like I was talking about before. So it's nothing too sophisticated, it's just streamlining. You're right.
Making things easy.
Yeah.
So, Chairman, what else do you have as far as questions go for Drew? Drew is a fountain of knowledge. Take advantage of it.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love everything that you're saying about automation and how you're not trying to take away a human's job. You're just helping that human be more focused at something else that a machine can't do, right? So what you're saying, I can completely relate, because that's exactly what we do at Vana High Security with pen testing. When we're automating pen testing, I'm not saying that our solution can take away a pen tester, but I'm saying that a pen tester can actually use the solution to run an automated network penetration test and pick up all the things that you would normally do using logic and scripts. That way, the pen tester can focus on, new exploits and new threats that are coming out and figuring ways to add new attack vectors. So my other question for you is, does your solution reduce SOC analysts' alert fatigue at all?
Yes, because I've spent a good decade or so onboarding customers onto MSSP platforms, onto SOC services, that type of stuff. We used to spend 6 weeks tuning, which is just too long. You shouldn't be turning on all those use cases and alerts and analytics to begin with to need a 6-week tuning process. So we deal with that in 2 ways. We only turn on, one, we only bring in events that are relevant for security analytics that align to the likely threat scenarios you'll face. So, either via your industry through our threat intelligence, like you might be targeted by TA505 or other specific, ransomware groups. This is the techniques they use. So here's how you can detect that. So therefore, these are the log sources you need. So we turn just those ones on, and therefore we turn on detection rules that are related to that. That knocks out, 90%. Actually, don't quote me on numbers. That knocks a large amount of the noise down. And then we have our sort of shared workspace that does lookups. So the way it works with Sentinel, it all sits on top of log analytics, and the customer has a workspace and we have a workspace and there's logs in there, and we do a cross workspace lookup with our high fidelity rules. And those are our rules that we've got across multiple customers that we've spent sort of years tuning and shaping to be, really, really relevant. So if it does fire, stuff's gone wrong. So, you don't get that flood of alerts. The other way we deal with it is technically we can, and this is where we're seeing a big shift. We can and do turn on automated responses. So, so we turn on things like isolating an endpoint, blocking a user, actual activities that should happen immediately when malware is detected on an endpoint or something like that, which for years companies have been too scared to turn on. Oh no, we might, interrupt someone's work. Well, would you rather that than actual, from the drop of the calling out to a C2, then pivoting across and then you're being ransomware and double extorted? Would you rather that, or would you rather someone be disrupted for 20 minutes while our automated investigation runs in the background, gives the all clear or whatever? So, it's turning on things that kick in, block, react, do that, by also providing some nice, what we call buttons to do it if you're a bit too scared to turn it on by default. But the stuff that we do turn on, it's very high fidelity. It's the relevant stuff. It's not the low, the high volume level of noise.
Scans, scans and all the nonsense. So I'm going to do something different tonight. I'm going to ask one more question, and I'm going to open up the floor to Drew and let him fire questions at us. So the last question for Drew is from Ryan. He says, looking into the crystal ball, what are the new emerging threats we need to be aware of, Drew?
Emerging threats?
New ones. Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah, all right. Well, it's still leveraging legitimate infrastructure, legitimate stuff that blends into the background noise. That's not going to trigger on your IOCs, your threat feeds, all of that. It's legitimately compromised accounts blending in. An example of that is the Google Sync being used as C2 that came out today or yesterday. I noticed some news came out a few days ago where Google said they're blocking certain API access to like Chromium and a few of the other Chromium-based browsers. I was like, well, that's interesting. And then I see the news break that it's because Google Sync is being used as a C2 for an extension. So I'm like, okay, right. So again, it's using that legitimate infrastructure. So the emerging aspect of it, which I guess has already emerged, is more of that
API,
of that legitimate stuff being used and blending into the background.
I find that with a lot of cloud hosted services too. When you're not involved with the secure of the platform, like Discord, we ran into an issue with Discord because of vulnerabilities that were built into their API and their webhooks. So customers are really at a disadvantage because we have to rely on that cloud providing platform to secure and standardize all of their loads, which is a freaking nightmare if you're running a podcast or doing anything social because you hook into all different types of media. So yeah, like I can definitely see that as an emerging threat. So also AI, let's use that distorted Hunter S. Thompson label of AI and say, in the next 10 years, how do you see AI being used as a nefarious purpose?
Well, if the likes of, say, again, I'll talk about GPT-3, if that evolves to its next variation, I guess GPT-4, if that can get to a state of real-time capability where the data set can be trained on the entire internet as stuff happens, then what we talked about before with the kind of smoking them out, forcing the attacker's hand, that type of thing, that's going to get a lot harder because that is going to shift and change at internet scale. So, I mean, if you start unleashing an AI capability like that, you're not up against a human with humans' inherent flaws that, the mistakes that'll eventually come. That's going to be the biggest challenge. And that is where the next level of detection capability, and this is something else I'm starting to really get into, is like detecting, GANs, detecting bots, detecting if content has been created by a human or not. How do we know what it is? So it's the same thing. How do we know if we're up against a threat actor that's human or AI? That's going to be the emerging challenge if you're talking 10 years.
Right. And that goes back to that meme of, am I a robot? And there's a robot sitting there like looking, should I check yes or no? But the NSA has a really cool way of determining human versus robot versus actual location versus spoof location. And they utilize universities around the world and made a network of these universities and these sensors to not only look at internet latency times when it comes to registering for a service or filling out a form, but also the temperature at which the CPU at those censoring points runs at. So if there's a fluctuation in that temperature and that latency goes down, they know that more than likely it's a machine and not a human behind that function. So the NSA tried to approach us with the company I was with to try to get us to take that technology to market. NSA has a really interesting way of sending lawyers and saying, hey, we have this technology, but we can't put it into the commercial world. So we're looking at you to help us. And our oversounding vote was no, because we don't know. I knew that they used internet latency times and SAT communications to pinpoint convoys to take people out. So it was like, what are you using internet latency and fingerprint of CPU temperatures for? Like that's a little too spooky. But yeah, like my whole thing for the past, I guess, 2 years was AI. What we know of AI being used to produce new types of malware, new types of attacks that aren't necessarily going to be detected, because as a human, I can go into, let's say, something like Darktrace and run a PowerShell over specific ports, specific environment variables, and get it to go, no problem, externally. So, and that's with AI. So if we depend solely on AI, and a lot of what I'm finding is a lot of CISOs who haven't been deep in technical details and had their hands on for the past 10 years, they hear the buzzword AI, got to have it. Yeah. Got to put it in network. It'll decrease the amount of people I have to hire. It'll save my budget. Perfect. But what they don't understand is once you deploy that and you let those people go, you're right back where you started because you put it into a network that's already hosted. So yeah, I think AI, we're on the precipice of like a really big deciding point for the government, for the US government in general. Do we, as a country, support AI and pump money into development and really get behind it? Or do we bail on it because it could turn really, really ugly? And in the US, it's kind of a coin flip, right? Because we have a lot of big data companies here that are headquartered here. So there's a lot of jobs and a lot of things at stake, but at the same time, the government has hooks into all those companies. So coming from the UK side of things, what's your take on that? And then I'm going to open it up to whatever questions you have for me, Trammy, or Cham.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think we're past the point of stopping the pumping of money into that area. I think it's done. It's on. It's happening. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be stopped at this point. No, I don't. It reminds me of DARPA with their attempts with their new, you roll in a rack with their competition, and you say, okay, find a 0 day on this, and it has to fight and defend at the same time, and that they've got the machine versus machine competition going on. Yeah. And that's what 3-4 years ago now. So they're too far down the path to pull out the funding from that, and it's just going to get more and more and more advanced. It's just what visibility will we have of it? Who really knows? But yeah, it'll be interesting to see when it comes out from the pure marketing world into real world use in our industry and how it can be leveraged. That's the point we're not at yet. Yeah. But it will happen. Yeah, give it a couple of years, and it will definitely happen.
Totally agree. I mean, look at how DARPA brought the internet to the people and civilians inside every home.
So they'll be the ones to bring actual AI to the rest.
Exactly. So I've never done this on a podcast. I've never given the guests the free shots at the hosts. So here's your chance. Any questions you have for me, Trammy, or Cham? I won't dodge them. I may duck them a little bit, but I'll answer your question.
Yeah. Okay. One from a couple of podcast episodes ago. So you put up a challenge, and you put a link. There was a link to an e-commerce store, and on that, the only thing I could see about it was replicated a legitimate one, and then it had a Discord link, another link, and another link in there. What else was going on with that? What did I miss?
So in the process of those steps was a base 64 code. Mm-hmm. So if you would have grabbed the base 64, you could have cut through all of the other stuff and got strictly to the Discord link.
Right. So it was just to find the Discord link. So I did find the other links. Okay. So yeah, something more interesting then. So what can you say about your Fancy Bear links and that side of in the Eventbrite? It said with APT 28 and your links there. What can you tell us about that?
So that was when I was a confidential informant in 2016. I've always been connected to Fancy Bear, APT 28. Sophie, whatever their flavor of the week is, it's really the same group of people. But they had approached me on some PLC data. And so the FBI became pretty interested in that and used that as leverage to, I guess, get me to be a CI for a while, for a year. I do, however, think that like the APTs get a lot of bad press and a lot of finger pointing. Like immediately when there's a threat to the US, it can never be anybody else but Russia, and you see that with SolarWinds.
Well, yeah.
So
I was just going to say some of my experience on the incident response side, we've been up against mostly Chinese based threat actor groups. And just their level of sophistication. When I first came across it, just one, blew my mind, and two, the supply chain aspects of everything and the layers that they would go to. That was just absolutely insane. So we're seeing some articles, I don't know if you could trust them, around techniques changing from the traditional Russian methodologies to Chinese methodologies, and them switching around, and some doing ransomware now, some doing supply chain. I'm like, nah, I don't think so.
So this is normally how it happens, like within the nation state, especially like the Eastern Bloc and the red states, right? So when there's an operation, everybody, whether it be North Korea, whether it be China, whether it be Russia, they're all aware of what's going on. It's not something that they hide from each other. They're their own Five Eyes. So usually, like when something like SolarWinds hits, a door will be opened or cracked open, and other people will be invited in. Not just the group that has, the ultimate plan or that has the most laser focus or the most funding, but they allow everybody to come in from their trusted circle. And that's how it is really in any hacking group. Once we get the door open, we may charge for access, or we may want something in trade, but we're going to give you access to that network as well. With APT28, to be honest with you, they say that this has been going on for a while. I have not yet heard anybody define a while yet, although I can tell you it's probably been going on for at least 3 or 4 years. APT28 usually orchestrates the things very close to political timeframes, according to economy fluctuations. It's not, a lot of people think that, these nation state hackers will just launch an attack on a country just because they don't agree with something that's being said. No, they look for mass impact. They look for economic impact. They look for political impact. They look for civilian commercial. They want to be successful, so they don't shotgun plans. I know Israel, when they got attacked by Hamas, by a hacking group, their immediate response was, well, drop fucking bombs. And that's what they did. They destroyed the whole complex where these hackers supposedly were at. Probably weren't there, but, either way, they did a kinetic attack based on
I've got some experience of that in a country which is not too far away. But yeah, when there was an attempted coup there, the building that we had meetings in was the first one that got rocketed.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the way it is. But with APT28 and so the U.S. has a love-hate relationship with Russia. Can't survive with them, can't survive without them. And that's just the way it is. And politically, we've always had, the Republicans have been more inclined to listen. Democrats don't really care because they want to bring in that socialist, and they want to be the ones bringing it in. They don't want Russia stepping on their toes saying, hey, this is how it's going to be. But I can tell you, APT28 has been in for a while, and what we've seen so far and disclosed is probably the tip of the iceberg. I spoke to I talked to TechStrong, and I said, eventually we're going to see, hopefully we'll see the truth where SolarWinds reach to as far as infrastructure, critical infrastructure, the power grid, the water treatment facilities, military organizations, because the U.S. government can say that's a matter of national security. We don't have to disclose that. But then they're really not being honest with the civilians saying, hey, look, they're literally in our infrastructure. They could flip a switch, put us back to the Stone Age. We have no electricity. So that's a risk that we run. The government, is very hush hush, but I can tell you that APT28 probably didn't work alone. And I think you see that through the different types of malware and different services targeted, that there were multiple groups involved, but I can tell you that they were all probably vetted by APT28 and GRU. So there's my long extended answer.
And Trammy, so what do you enjoy most in your current role, and what you do with your sort of automation hat on, and what things you do day to day? What's your most enjoyable aspects, and where's your sort of passion lie?
Yeah, so I still have a lot of learning to do. I've been in cybersecurity for 2 years. I'm head of marketing for Vana High Security, and we specialize in automated pen testing, specifically network pen testing. And I think the best part about my job is that I'm always learning something new. There's always something new to learn. So there's technology is always changing. So I'm still, I like the offensive security because obviously that's kind of what we do. But what I really enjoy is listening to customers. So we do a lot of demos. We're on a lot of scoping calls. I love listening to that conversation and just understanding like, what are some of the challenges that real businesses face in cybersecurity? And I've seen a range, right? I've seen some companies that, they know cybersecurity is important, but they don't know where to start. They still need that kind of education. Budget is always a big thing. And then you've got, enterprise level companies where, money's not an option. They just want the best. And they'll just throw their money at everything. So for me, it's just like a hybrid of different customers and their needs. And I'm still trying to find a pattern, right? Because that's my job as a marketer. And what I like too is that working in cybersecurity, I don't feel like I'm one of those manipulative type of marketers where I'm trying to like track what users are doing on our website. Like we don't do any of that stuff. I'm a huge believer in ethical marketing. So for me, it's just, hey, like we want to help companies, protect their network more efficiently, faster, and not, pay a hefty price tag for it. So it's I really much enjoy that. I really feel like I'm actually helping businesses.
Yeah, that's what I like when I do sometimes. Well, as CEO, I have to put my sales hat on, and I the subtle sales, the trusted aspects of it coming from a technical person or coming from someone who's not pushing hard. They're just help.
Exactly.
Get involved and find out how you can do interesting things.
Exactly. That's one thing I love about the company is that we don't have like a very aggressive sales tactic for us. Or what we want to do is we want to listen, right? So asking the right questions and then listening to what the customers are saying that they're having challenges with, and then to find out if we're a good fit to do business together. And if they're not, we have lots of partners that we recommend them to. So we have a lot of MSSP partners that, we have on hand. So if a customer needs a service that we don't provide, we connect them to a lot of those partners. And it's really about building that community and working together because, it's hard for the small startups to kind of compete with some of the bigger players out there.
And right, finally, Cham. So what type of skills the people you're working with feel that they need, more experience, and what areas do they feel they're kind of lacking at this point that they need to, when they're going for getting jobs or going for training, that they feel they're just not, they don't have the experience in yet? What specific areas there are they sort of being asked about?
So, Cham, go over like the interviews and the positions that people are looking for as far as recruiting goes, because you have
what are people asking for at this point?
There's a mixture depending on what type of company you apply for. Some of them are like assessment based, so you come in for like more or less the whole day, sometimes 9 to 4, and they assess how you work on independently and how you work as a group. Sometimes
so it's more the people skills, the more how they're working, how they're doing things. Yeah.
And sometimes go on.
And the biggest problem with that too, I don't mean to interrupt, but the biggest problem is that you have, we talked about this in the last podcast, when you walk into interview and you have 5 people who have, specific expertise, and they're interviewing one candidate and beating this candidate down as if he should know all 5 or 6, principles. That leaves a really bad taste. And I've seen that, especially in US companies. They want the best of the best of the best. So, but what they understand is you put that pressure on people and they already see that you're going to be riding on their shoulders. It's not a good environment. But yeah, I mean, and it all goes back to like, so Cham and I have had like long discussions about the way the industry is going as far as hiring. And I've seen it with her trying to apply out of school to companies that need entry level, but 5 years of entry level experience. I mean, if you're entry level after 5 years, you should probably find another industry because it's not going so well for you.
I was going to say 5 years into my career, I was, what was I doing 5 years in? Probably like a senior network something.
Right.
I don't know.
But that's entry level for a lot of these companies, especially in Europe. It's like, and we started a company called Cryptasec, and we decided to launch that. I had a phone call from a company that wanted a pen test, and they said, "Are you Crest?" And I was like, first of all, I have no idea what the hell you're even saying right now. I'm not from here. I'm not Crest or whatever certification it is, but I do come with loads of experience and successful companies. So, we can continue, but if you require Crest, I'm not your guy. But then I found out later how much Crest accreditation costs. Mm-hmm. And it was not more of do you have the skill set? It was, are you willing to put forth that much more money to make your company successful? And I thought, the certification industry as a whole has taken advantage of all of our years of experience and really made it difficult for anybody to maneuver or to get one leg up. So when I was CISO of a company, I started looking at what do I need to do to validate my role? Because I knew this company was not on the up and up. I knew that they were using me for exposure, for PR or whatever. But I thought, my next role, I want to be valued for being a CISO. I want to be like legit, not just a name. I want to be somebody that can perform this. So when I looked at certifications, what I found is that they'll give you a cert for being a CISO, but you're going to pay for that too.
Yep.
A high amount of money. So really, are we paying to play the game like semi-pro footballers, or are we being recruited into the big leagues? It seems really weird, and especially here in the US, like we don't have that whole issue with hiring people for entry level. There's a lot of entry level here, but in the UK, it seems that that's been locked down and you're not getting in unless you're willing to pay the price to get into the game, which I think is very elitist and very, it's blocking of new creativity. And I think probably, and this is my opinion, I'm probably going to get shot down by the people who do certs, and I'm okay with that. But I think when certs came on the scene to validate people's value within a company, they ruined an entire industry.
Oh yeah, that's So certs, I've got a conflicting view of, because certs got me where I am in reality initially, because it got the keywords to get the right person attention, to give you the chance to get on the call to then talk and prove yourself. So and I started with certs, but I was lucky. I had a break for them for at least 5 years or so, but I'm sadly back on the cert cycle now with some new other interesting things. But it's actually now more because there's some interesting other things coming out. But for entry level, are they really needed? But if you don't have them, how are you going to get the right keyword to get the attention?
Exactly. And who has enough money to sit at home during the pandemic and take boot camps and pay for this stuff when they don't have a job? It's like,
especially if you want the real good stuff like SANS courses or whatever, it's like thousands and thousands of pounds.
Man, so SANS courses, when they still offer to take the test online to challenge exams, I think I spent like $4,000 challenging like 5 exams in one day, and I passed them. And they said, we're going to put you before an audit committee to make sure you didn't cheat. And I thought, wait a minute, you're offering these exams. I paid for it. I passed. Now you want to question me? Mm. They eventually gave me the certs, but it was like, if I can go on and challenge these exams without paying like the $10,000 for boot camp, you guys are running a racket. Like someone's making lots of money here, and it's not me. So I think certification serves its purpose as far as like showing people are willing to put forth the effort. But when you tell me that they need a bachelor's in computer science or 5 years experience plus certs, it tells me that you don't really want someone entry level. You want someone entry level that can carry on like 10 responsibilities and get paid for one. Mm-hmm. So I tend to tell people, those types of companies, take a look at it. This is your interview just as much as it's their interview.
True.
So when they interview you, have your questions ready, be ready to ask them what their long-term plan is, what their roadmap is for a SOC. And I can tell you that most CISOs will respond with, not really sure. Because it's such a ever evolving, like daily structure that it's hard to put a pulse on, especially with the pandemic.
I see that question there from Ryan saying, advice for someone finding their niche. So it's quite easy, really. You just build a lab, play, do,
yes.
do, create something. Get a free £100 credit on Azure, or spin up a dedicated server somewhere, and just build stuff, run VMs, create the lab, and then see what you find most interesting and run with it.
Exactly. So I did that in Essex with Cham. I showed her, different types of attacks, and we built all kinds of like virtual boxes, and that's the only way to really learn, because nobody's going to sit down and say, okay, here's a book and I'm going to show you how it's like academically done, because more than likely that academically done is not effective when it comes to actually teaming events.
And it's not just doing CTFs either.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to teach you the fundamentals of networking on servers, on how to, boot off how to build an operating system and run stuff and share files from here to here, and the challenges you get of when you have a lab having to do all those pieces. Because those fundamental skills of networking and infrastructure are what's going to really help you down the track, because you have all those layers of knowledge there, and that's critical.
What really boosted my career and really got me started was actually just going home and installing Snort and deploying Snort across my network. That taught me so much stuff about networking, how things communicate, and signature-based learning. I mean, stuff like that. Like, you can learn it in a book, but I'm the type of person who has to see it, put my hands on it, actually do it. And I think most people in our industry have to have that tangible. We have to see the ones and zeros. We have to see, doing a check config, seeing that everything is working the way it's supposed to be working. That's interesting. So outside of work, Drew, I know you don't have much time outside of work, but when you do, what does Drew like to do for Drew to get away from the industry, to reset and get a fresh perspective?
Well, I don't. I'm constantly always on. My idea of switching off is maybe reading a book that's slightly still on topic. But yeah, I mean, I used to, when we could, do a lot of travel, get around, see some interesting places, try and get away that way. But yeah, it's very rare for me to reset. I don't reset. I've been accused of being a robot many a times.
That's what happens when you run a company, right?
Well, that's right. But even before that, But no, I take my dog out for big walks, in the forests and places as much as possible, and try and see some nature. I think that's always very, very important. That's the only real resetting that I can do when I can.
I fight that same battle. And especially like I started a company back in 2008 called Black Cell Security, ran that for a while. Started one in London, worked on that for a bit. But I find it's hardest once you get past like the actual starting of companies and sitting on the boards of companies and being on the advisory board, because you think that you can be on an advisory board for 3 or 4 different companies, and it becomes this huge like biological monster that takes up more time than what you have. So enjoy being CEO. I'm so envious of being able to start something and bring it to a level of importance, right? So we've been watching Tiberium at Jenny and Ned for a while, as well as, through social media and our connection or whatever. And I really dig what you guys are doing. And Ryan, I mean, you have a gym with Ryan. Ryan's a great guy. And with ISSA, him and Luke were just amazing.
No, I think with Ryan, because he actually came from the recruitment world. So he was the only recruiter that I ever trusted who, technically knew what he was talking about there. Sure. That's the thing. Once you've got that trust established with someone, it's good to build things with those types of people. That's the best thing.
And that's important, man, because like, you know, coming from my background and seeing the hacker wars and the different, you know, fighting within groups and stuff, same thing with corporate world. You know, you're going to get people who try to slam doors and people who try to attack you for being successful. My first shot at that was a couple weeks ago. At first I didn't handle it too well because I was so frustrated. But I realized that that's going to happen. And roadblocks and speed bumps are going to pop up, but it's how you handle diversity that makes you successful. And I think you and Tiberium.
Yeah, well, the last few weeks, there's been a lot of things that are popping up, and it's just because everything's piling up. You know, we're heading towards this launch. Everything's just going more and more and more. And yeah, every day there's just some big challenge that we get through, and that's what it's about. But there's always something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's usually that one quote from that one person in that one tough situation that you carry with you after you get through it and you've made it to the other side. So I keep a journal of those quotes that pop up at just the right opportune times, so that when I face something equally or similar, I can revert back to that journal and say, oh, well, you know, this is how I got past that. But yeah, it's a very interesting, complex biological industry. I mean, we work like a human body system does. And, you know, there's failures here and there, but, you know, I think the future is pretty bright when we have CEOs like you and companies like Tiberium and platforms that we can depend on. So with that being said, I appreciate your time, Drew. If anybody has any questions, last questions for Drew, pop it into my chat and I'll ask him. If not, I did do a hack today, but it's from the Social Engineers Toolkit. And it's really kind of basic. We can go over it if you want. Wayne has a question. All right, what's Wayne's question? It's coming up. So while we're doing that, I'll tell you about the hack that I did. It's a QR code. Basically, I coded a QR, injected a PowerShell script, or actually it points to a PowerShell script, and then hosted on a web server. You scan it with Android phone, and it forces the download of the APK and gives you interpreter access. So it's really just an expansion of an earlier hack that I did, just using a QR code, because not a lot of people actually will look at that QR code. They'll just scan it and jump right on it. So, you know, 50% Android, 50%, you know, Apple, I'm going to get 50% shell access to whoever scans it.
Okay, I stop right there. Okay, so are you saying I shouldn't be trusting QR codes?
Yes, absolutely.
It does have a dependency on your phone trusting third-party APK files or thing. Yes, but that people have that enabled. So yeah.
Okay, so I know to hover over a link to check a URL before clicking on it. What do I do to see if I should trust a QR code?
So the QR code on an Android phone, when you take your camera and you put it on the QR code, it'll tell you, do you want your browser to open up this link? Now, whether you understand the link or know it's legit, that's up to the user. But most users, not in our industry, I can probably social engineer probably at least 80% to scan the QR code and just install whatever. So it's just another way of like delivering the link to the payload.
Yeah.
Nothing spectacular. Really,
there's now QR codes are actually finally in common use because they have to be, because we can't touch anything when we're out in public. So.
Exactly. So I'm trying to come up with different ways to obfuscate code and to deliver shell code without actually having to be on a system or just in your everyday like operations through grocery stores or whatever. So I can go through and, you know, if you want to restock your shelves with milk or whatever, I can slap my own QR code on there and we can get that milk flowing. So flight tickets. Yeah, man, fuck y'all on flight tickets. I just wish I had a passport. So flight tickets are another interesting thing. So each one of those boarding passes are printed on the fly and they're kind of randomly generated based on the flyer's details. So that's a little hard to predict. However, if someone gets there early enough and gets their boarding pass and maybe I have eyes on it or can take a photo, I could potentially beat them to the security line, but that would be building an ID on the fly and being legit with their boarding pass code would be very difficult.
A lot of people do post their tickets straight on social media.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I'm not condoning people go look for those, but yeah, people will post their entire life on social media. So much info from those. Okay, so to embed a remote shell and embed that into a QR code to deploy at restaurants. So I wasn't thinking more like restaurants. I was thinking more of random stickers placed here and there because people like that level of, I guess, unknowing or mystique. They'll scan a QR code on a sticker on a light pole before they will go into a grocery store and scan the QR code of an actual like tangible piece of food, because it carries that what is this? I've never seen this before. Curiosity. And that feeds into a lot of people's psyche. They have to know, and they won't be happy until they know it. So that's why I get into more obfuscated stuff, because it's easier to pass over because people are so very curious as to what's going on in the world around them. And Ryan just posted, I'll post all of these in an email and send it out to all the listeners afterwards, but we have links about boarding passes, etc. Okay. Drew, any questions for us regarding the haunted house or the podcast or just in general? I'm going to wrap it up.
So, what is coming up? Who's your next guest then?
The next guest is actually Alton, and Alton's from Von High, and he's going to talk to us about automated pen testing and kind of the industry in general. Dude, you're more than welcome to sit in on any conversation we have, whatever podcast. This will be uploaded to TechStrong and will play probably next week or the week after, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday during their Digital Anarchist episodes every day. So,
excellent.
Yeah. So hopefully that'll help with Tiberium and spread the word even more for you, whatever we can do to help. Chammy, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. Cham, are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And
Drew, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Drew, you've been awesome.
Yeah, thanks for answering all my questions and just sharing your knowledge.
And merchandise, there's a link tree in the Discord with all the merchandise, donations, whatever you guys want to do to support what we do to make this free to everybody every week. Feel free to donate or help out whatever time you have or whatever you can. And Drew, I look forward to talking to you on Discord, and maybe we can circle back at some point after the launch and talk about how things are going.
Ooh, last question for Drew. When is the launch? When should we look forward to the launch?
Let me check the calendar. 16th of February.
16th of February. Okay.
We're close.
Nice.
So I'm expecting you on the podcast in March, early March, to talk about.
No problem at all.
All right, man. All right. Talk to you soon. Thanks, guys, for showing up, and thanks for listening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you guys.
All right, everybody. Next up, we have our latest installment of CISO Talk. Chenxi Wang, who is our guest moderator for this one, she speaks with Rinki Sethi, who's the CISO of Twitter, Marcia Main, who is the CISO of Rally Health, and Algird P., who's the cybersecurity lead at the World Economic Forum. They are making rain out of COVID-19, security beyond COVID-19. They are talking about how they're turning COVID into opportunities for innovation and growth. Great discussion. Let's give it a listen.
Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to CISO Talks with Media Ops. Today I am your host, standing in for Alan Schimmel. I welcome today a panel of experts, CISOs and security leaders. We're going to be discussing security beyond COVID as our discussion topic today. And I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and their affiliation. I should introduce myself first. I'm Chen-Si Wang. I'm the founder and general partner for Rain Capital, a cybersecurity-focused venture fund. I'm a longtime cybersecurity person, and I've collaborated quite a bit with MediaOps, and very happy to be moderating this panel today. So I'll turn over to my panelists. Algirde, I'll start with you.
Oh, thank you, Chen-Si, for having me here. It's a pleasure and definitely an honor. Algirde Pipikaite, I am lead for strategic initiatives at the Center for Cybersecurity with the World Economic Forum, and I am calling in from wine o'clock. It's late Friday evening here in Geneva, Switzerland. So definitely afterwards, I'll be relaxing. Over to you.
And Marcia?
Hi, I'm Marcia Main, CISO for Rally Health. I've been with Rally now for about 2 years. Very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And Rinki?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Rinki Sathi. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for Twitter, where I've been now for 4 months.
Yes, very exciting times indeed. And I will start with Rinki because you're somewhat new CISO with Twitter. And Twitter obviously has publicly stated that Twitter employees can work from home indefinitely if they wish to. And we'll start the discussion setting the context of beyond COVID, the work environment, how that changes between different companies. And I'll start with you, Rinki. So with Twitter making this public announcement, how do you see the different offices will continue to operate going forward this year and forward?
Yeah, it's interesting. So in joining Twitter, what I learned was prior to COVID, actually long before COVID had even started in the US, they had already had a plan to build out a remote workforce and to improve we're a very global company, and what Twitter does impacts people globally, and the company needs to represent that. So there was already a push to hire across the globe where we may not have offices, and just build out a more remote workforce. So when COVID happened, although there were some challenges, it actually, we were already staged to be like that. And post-COVID, I think there's going to be a hybrid environment. We've already opened up offices in countries where COVID has been contained and where things are opening up. So, and people are returning to the office. But Chen-Si, as you said, we're going to also allow people to continue to work from home or work remotely if that's their wish, and continue to support an environment that's extremely hybrid. So I think we're already operating in that way as things are starting to open up, but it'll be a very hybrid environment with offices maybe having a very different footprint going forward. It may not look like what we were used to before COVID.
Yeah, do you think you'll have a rotating office environment? People will come back in once in a while, or you'll have this really sort of delineation of in-office workers versus remote workers?
I think it's going to be a combination of the two. I think where we don't have offices, it'll be permanently remote workers. And where we do have offices, folks will roll in and out. They might coordinate with their teams. I think companies are still working through that. And there's going to be a lot of learnings that we're going to have as we move back into that office environment, which at least for the state of California is probably looking like late this year or maybe even into next year that the offices will open. But I think we'll learn. I've seen a lot of executives from different companies that are already starting to plan what might this look like. Will teams have to coordinate together? Which teams would have to coordinate if they want to meet in the office? So I think it's going to be a little bit hiccupy, if you will, and companies are going to figure it out as we move back into that kind of roll in, roll out hybrid environment.
And Marcia, how about you? How about things with Rally Health?
Yeah, it's very similar actually, because we're in the healthcare industry, but we operate very much like a tech company because we're, digital health. And we did have a philosophy of being in the office if you can. I think a lot of the leaders really wanted that. With COVID, that has changed. And actually this week we announced that we're going to have a hybrid model, very similar to what Rick was talking about, because where we do have offices, we're switching to hoteling desks, right? So you go, if you want to go into the office, you go pick a desk, the schedule ahead of time and go in. And if you want to be fully remote, you still have that opportunity as well. So I think going into kind of that hybrid format for us as well. But one thing COVID has definitely changed. I think we favored, right, being in the office most days, and that's definitely going to change, where we have to just be used to having a remote team in general, even though some people will choose to go to the office a couple of days a week, right? I think the remote team in general will stay.
Are you, have you been hiring remotely throughout 2020?
Yes, that was the big change. Honestly, I had never in my career hired someone without meeting them in person. I bet, most leaders experience this. And at first it was very nerve-wracking to me, because there is something about that in-person interaction, right? Even if you're hiring them to work in an office that's far away from you, you would have that initial meeting, just get a feel for the person, right? Can't do that. It is just very interesting. We had cases where it really didn't work. And I look back thinking, would it have been different, right? If I had had a chance to meet them in person, because it turned out, a few months later, that it wasn't a good fit. So I really wonder, I think it's still to be seen. I don't know that I have enough data, but to be seen just how much impact really in hiring.
I think that's a very visible trend, is people been hiring remotely throughout 2020. And even when things go back to normal, meaning that the pandemic is over, you're certainly not going to bring all these remote workers back to a campus. So that creates sort of the definite hybrid demand, if you will. Now, let me turn over to Algirde. Certainly, World Economic Forum is a different entity than the companies that we've been talking about. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how COVID has impacted your operating environment.
Well, of course, but I think first, on a very positive and optimistic mode, I'm very happy to hear that your guys are hiring. And it means the economy is picking up. And actually, we are also very lucky to be in a field that was barely touched from the economical standpoint. So, and here at the World Economic Forum, we definitely think about what does it mean beyond technology, this pandemic to us. We as an organization actually underwent quite significant changes and optimizations, which is very, very positive. And as you may have known, we just wrapped up first Davos Online, which was last week. It was the first time in 51 years that we have done fully online, which I think is brilliant because it brings Davos to the people. After, we went through transition literally after Davos last year, 2020. Because in Europe, pandemic started slightly earlier than it did in the United States. And very quickly, actually, our leadership was able to transition into fully digital, not only for ourselves and our staff, but also to bring the platform to hundreds of thousands of projects and people that wanted to get engaged to actually move the needle forward in improving the state of the world, specifically tackling the COVID-19 challenge. So we built a platform that is uniting around 90,000 of social entrepreneurs working and mobilizing them on COVID-19 projects. We have developed a COVID-19 action platform that unites around 1,200 largest corporations globally and puts governments together on the same platform and allows them to keep dialogues and projects going that actually save lives and livelihoods. So I think when I think about the World Economic Forum and what we underwent in the last almost a year, is beyond ourselves as an entity of around 800 people. We actually managed to transition into providing a platform for a social good. And that actually is a great satisfaction to be part of it. Yeah. But if I'm thinking, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish your thought.
When I actually think, listening to Marcia and Rinky and yourself, Chenchi, for me, after spending almost a year working from home, from time to time, appearing in the office as a blue moon, just enjoying myself and going back, we as humans develop habits in around 2 months, 66 days. That means our habit to work from home has been established very, very heavily. So I'm looking forward to observe leaderships of various institutions that will try to take people out of their homes, and how successful will they be? So stay tuned.
Yeah, that's interesting. When I think of the three entities represented here, certainly Twitter, Rinky, your company, is more on the forefront of modern infrastructure, cloud-based computing. So possibly is less of a shift for your company to move to a fully remote working environment. And what Algerde had just described as an organization that used to run in-person events, and they have to switch within the course of a few months to a fully digital platform, possibly had to go through a significant change. And Rally Health and Marcia, you are somewhere in the middle. So we have the different points of the spectrum or represented here. So I want to go back to, certainly this is a CISO talk. So we're talking about security and security strategies and postures. So I want to start with you, Rinky, again on, given that Twitter is, cloud native and very modern infrastructure driven, when the company moved to fully remote and will continue to be very hybrid going forward, did your team and your organization, your security organization, that is, have to do things differently because of COVID? Did you have to change your strategies? Did you have to maybe look at security postures and policies differently? Any examples there?
Yeah, it's interesting because, to what Algerde and Marcia just said, I'm actually one of the few folks that changed jobs during, or one of the many folks that changed jobs during COVID, and that too in a CISO role. And so when COVID hit, I actually wasn't with Twitter, I was with Rubrik, and which is a cloud data management startup in the Bay Area here. And it's interesting, I think every company faced similar challenges. Some were more prepared than others. But even in that, where you completely shift, like every company had to think about how are you going to do all hands meetings now going forward, or, just folks had to shift how they were doing things. What I saw both at Rubrik and Twitter, and even customers of when I was at Rubrik customers, is there's a huge push to cloud. You can't have people now going to data centers necessarily. And there was a huge push to, even companies that were thinking about cloud, I think their cloud journey was accelerated. And all of a sudden, there's this small talent pool of cloud security folks that folks were tapping into, that if we're going to go and transform into cloud, we have to maybe think about how we're doing business differently and really think about security. So there's a huge shift in that way. I also saw that a big pushes towards zero trust, including Twitter, because you're no longer reliant on your own networks necessarily. You need to kind of rely on a zero trust principle or methodology. And so there's a huge push for that to enable your remote workforce to be more secure. So those were some of the areas. And then there's some funny things that we hadn't thought about, like now if you're thinking about M&A due diligence, or you're thinking about, you have employees that are at home, there are significant others and just other people in the house might be overhearing conversations, and how do you protect data as it relates to that, and even just printed documents and things like that. How do you teach your employees, and how do you keep secure in this new way of working. So there were a lot of new things we had to roll out in terms of training. And then again, as I talked about, just this big pushes towards zero trust and acceleration of programs that people had, maybe their companies had planned, but now needed to accelerate and really move forward quickly.
Yeah, Marcia, I think I want to follow up on that train of thought. For you guys, for your company, you certainly deal with a lot of health data, right? So data protection, data privacy, has that changed? The approach of doing that, has that changed throughout the COVID period?
Yeah, absolutely. From a like an internal perspective, I think our story was very similar to what Reiki was saying, because we are, fully cloud native. I think our tech stack is very similar to what she has as well. But from a consumer perspective, right, that you're saying, it's interesting because none of the problems we have right now are new, right? I mean, we have always had to secure, well, not always, but at least for decades now, had to secure assets and users who are not in the building, right? So remote, and our business being really digital health, it has always been in our scope of work. But with COVID, what has been interesting in the health care industry is the push to digital, right? Because we have had the capabilities to do digital health for a long time. But even from a consumer perspective, patients are maybe not very comfortable or very interested in telehealth or mobile health and things like that, right? So the adoption was a little slower. COVID just kind of blew that up, right? So the demand for that and the focus on that, I think what's changed for us was getting funding, right? And a shift to making sure that security is nimble enough to keep up with that. Because I think, honestly, security, really, if I had to say, regulation has been a little bit of a hindrance there for digital health, right? We have if you think about HIPAA, right, there's a very checkboxy, way of looking at security when you're thinking about data protection. And it is huge. I mean, there's a huge risk around PHI. It's serious business, right? And we care about that, obviously, for consumers. But you really need to be risk-based so that you are really asking yourselves, like, is this a big deal enough for me to stop progress here and enable all this value for our users as well? So I think more and more the changes I've felt is room for that, for being nimble, for being more flexible, for being more risk-based, and that demand for security to adapt fast to enable digital health.
So following that, was there an area that you invested in throughout 2020 that you might not have done it without the pandemic happening? Is there a specific, security technology that you've adopted, or a product you invested, or maybe an approach that you adopted that was really to accommodate this new working environment?
Yeah, I think internally, right? So if you're thinking about, I don't know if you're asking specifically for like our users, right, our internal Rally users, or if you're asking about our consumers, right? Because I think it's a little bit.
So you can, whichever example you think is relevant, right? Or things might have accelerated your adoption journey, or might have been different approach that you would have taken otherwise without this pandemic.
Yeah, no, I think, internally, I won't speak to it too much because it's the same, really the same story that Rinky was talking about with zero trust, right? So internally, like I finally got more support and a little bit more investment to expand our zero trust strategy, which has been something I wanted to do anyways, but COVID has brought it to, executive attention and understanding. We needed the funds. And, but from a consumer perspective, I think the most important thing we were able to push more was authentication security tooling, right? Because I think it's something that, Rally is part of United Health Group, larger organization. And I think one thing that we struggle with, as a whole organization is that consumer identity, right? Think about from a user perspective, how touchy this is in the healthcare system, right? it gets into eligibility, you get into Medicare, and like it's a very complicated system to first identify who are you and what are the things you're eligible for and should get access to, and then securing all of that, like from an authentication and an authentication perspective. And so our systems needed investment to do that better. And I think because demand increased so much with COVID for digital health, that became even more pronounced, and we were able to get more funding to make the improvements and the maturity that we've been wanting to do, for a couple of years. But that's why, we always say, I would say, like, COVID has not really necessarily brought up these challenges, or we didn't know we needed this before COVID, but, don't let a crisis go to waste, if you will, right? I think that was the part that it was helpful in the sense of highlighting that need and getting attention and getting funding.
Yeah, I love it. Don't let a crisis go to waste. I think many innovative organizations are definitely doing that with COVID, thinking about accelerating cloud adoption journey, accelerating digital transformation journey, that things that they would have done otherwise maybe in a slower pace, but now is being done a little faster, more rapidly. And in the end, hopefully the organization will come out stronger, right? And Algirde, I'd love to hear about the how World Economic Forum went about building this digital platform, really brought the events to the people, not just the leaders, but really to the people, and how you deal with content and everything that going forward.
Very good question. And actually, I would build on what Rinky and Marcia said, because they literally took words out of my mouth, what I would have said. I think, sadly, with the ongoing pandemic and the situation in the world and how much pain it has caused, but on what Marcia said, never let a crisis go to waste, we can look actually through 2020, and we can see that the COVID-inflated digitalization actually did a massive favor to cybersecurity. Like it's kind of like the virologists were talking about a virus coming in, and we all knew it is actually a risk. How many of us cared? Very similarly with cybersecurity, we in the field, we know the risks, and we know that potential cyber pandemic actually can happen. Now, what did 2020 brought? At first, it brought massively diminished budgets because everyone was in panic mode. We didn't know what's going to happen. Then suddenly, when board level executives had to deal with serious M&A discussions, IP situations, and discussing any other risks, suddenly in online channels where we all knew we're not necessarily all secure from the get-go, that became a much more abrupt issue to them, and hence a lot of budgets were relieved. And exactly the same happens in majority of organizations that at least we touched, we discussed, and we partnered with. And if I may, then on top of the SolarWinds situation that is still ongoing, and we still do not know what is the long-term effect of that breach, cybersecurity was in 2020 a board level issue. It was elevated. So when I think about the future, I actually really hope that will allow us in technology field, so not only security, but actually also technology developers, really start applying security by design, security by default, privacy by design, privacy by default principles that are, for example, in Europe, in European Union already an obligation by law, the famous GDPR. But as long as we will not develop technology that is seamless, transparent, and actually user-friendly, we will have to rely heavily on leadership, providing more and more funding to protect against the same attack vectors that we've been protecting for quite a while. But I think digitalization did us a favor. Please oppose me. Happy to take a position here. But I think really this crisis, at least for cybersecurity sector, did not go to waste.
So I have a question for all three of you. Do you think with COVID and with the change in IT infrastructure and security strategies, everybody working from home, and a pervasive use of cloud computing. Have we increased our attack surface, or have we decreased our attack surface? So I'll start with you, Agade, first.
The easy question come to me, huh? I think we definitely have increased attack surface. Now, I might say something controversial. The attack surface has increased. The number of attacks we have seen in 2020 has increased massively by multiple fold, and especially in sectors like Marcius and healthcare, because that was one of the most vulnerable sectors where hackers knew and cyber criminals knew that they will have to pay in case they are successful in breaching them. But at the same time, the visibility and the issue of cybersecurity has been elevated, and actually people are becoming and understanding more than a year and a half ago that each one of us play part in security. So again, we did a lot of trainings throughout the years, but I think through being so dependent on digitalization in every single sphere in our lives, and especially in our breadwinning situation, our livelihood depends on being able to connect. Everyone is becoming much more aware of the threats. And I think now we not only gained advantage with the leadership, but we also are gaining advantage with our workforce, who are much more aware of the threats, risks, and basically every day we hear breaches that are quite painful, culminating 2020 with a massive breach.
So your position is we have increased attack surface, but we've increased awareness as well, and possibly our readiness to deal with security incidents.
Exactly. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me turn to Rinki. What do you think? Increase or decrease in terms of attack surface? And anything you wish to add to that?
Yeah, I wouldn't frame it as increase or decrease. We still have an attack surface. 95% of breaches are still caused by human error of some sort. We're still, and that's an unfortunate reality, right? Breaches are still caused 95% by human error, whether that's inadvertently doing something in the cloud, making something public you shouldn't, or whether it's responding to a phishing email or whatever it might be. And so I would say the attack surface, it's different in the cloud versus what you do, whether it's in your data center. And I think it's changing is what I would say. So we're less susceptible maybe to some of the physical threats that we faced in the non-COVID environment, but we're still susceptible to other threats. And so I don't like putting it as an increase, decrease. I think it's different. It's ever changing. And that's why we're in this field, right? In cybersecurity, that it's always an ever changing field. New technologies are entering, which are really exciting. That can help us just prevent from the new attack vectors we might see. And we're starting to see that some things are starting to become kind of obsolete. And, again, thinking about your own perimeter is less important for companies now. So I think it's just different.
So different, but do you think there is a visible change in the way how ready we are to deal with security incidents in such a hybrid environment? Do you think we're more ready or we're less ready?
I mean, here, I feel like we've been in this situation now for a year, whether we were now, it was tough in the beginning when you think about dealing with an incident. Just how do you gather a global team together for those that were used to sitting in a security operations center, which I remember I managed that just a few years ago where I had a team sitting in an actual SOC that we had built. And that's no longer the case, right? And you rely so much by the banter that happens back and forth with the team. And so there's a couple things that have happened. We had to find ways to collaborate, and how do you keep a team in sync that needs to be constantly in sync? And they've found remote ways of doing that now. And I think the other thing that's happened is we're now, because of COVID, you can get talent from anywhere in the world. So I think that you're bringing in new thought diversity into how you go and respond to incidents, which will make teams and companies stronger. So I see it as it was tough in the beginning, for some companies that weren't already global, that didn't have a remote workforce. But I think now, as I've talked to my peers in industry, we figured it out, and I think we're better for it. And there's still some challenges. We always used to joke around in the SOC that what's the one incident that'll bring like the incident response team down, and it's someone getting sick. Was always the joke that if someone gets sick in a SOC, everybody's going to get sick, and at least that's not the case now.
Oh, I love that. It's you actually stole some of the future questions that I'm going to ask about team culture. So hold that thought. And Marcia, I want a quick comment from you about increase or decrease. I know I'm asking these, black and white questions, and you guys all gave really good answer, but I'd love to hear some more definitive statement about whether you think its attack surface has increased or decreased, or our readiness has improved or disrupted.
Yeah, from an attack surface, I think I can give a yes or no answer. I feel that it has not increased, right? So if you think about attack surface as the ways in which, right, we were getting attacked. I mean, so much what we're doing digitally now, we were already doing, but I think it's the volume of it, right? We're doing more of it. We get people exploiting more of certain aspects of it than others, causing stress, right, in certain areas of risk more than before. But if you think about the surface itself, I would say it's pretty much the same, with the exception, some of the stuff that Rinky mentioned in the beginning, which were things I had to deal with. She was talking about having spouses who can overhear. I guess you can think that as a different threat in that surface that we haven't thought about before. Or, I had to change my policy to make sure you mentioned Alexa type devices, right? Don't have that in the room where you were taking consumer calls. So in your house. So yes, there were a few tweaks like that we had to worry about, but I think in general, I feel like I could say it has not changed. Our readiness, was challenged to how much we're ready to respond to that, given the volume, but the surface itself, I think, is pretty much the same.
Great, and I want to pivot around to the discussion that Rinky actually started for us. Think about the security operations team, right? You used to sit together, and as Rinky said, a lot of work is done through this background banter, right? And you say, "Oh, have you seen this? Have you seen this?" And they're just reaching over to the next cubicle, and that doesn't happen today, right? So if I want to talk to my teammate, I have to in advance set up a meeting. Everything is sort of intentional. There's very little sort of accidental connections happening that in this virtual world. And I'm hearing a lot about companies having to instill a more human-centric culture, for the lack of a better word, is essentially be more intentional about caring for the human as an employee, because you don't have that in-person connection. And has that change impacted how you run your team, or really how you run your corporate security as a whole? And have you really thought about how human-centric approach changed the way you do business? And I'll start with you, Agade.
Well, has it changed? Of course, dynamics have changed drastically, because you also cannot organize the after office extracurriculum activities. Yeah, like you were even avoiding creating interactions that before we used to use as team building exercise. You lost capabilities in bringing new people, onboarding new people, and actually introducing them in like a team environment. So a lot of things have changed, and I believe it builds not only for the 2020 or the upcoming year in 2021. I think it's a much bigger highlight that we as leaders and managers of teams will just need to be much more creative. I think 2020 also showed a lot of issues on inclusivity, integrity, diversity. So even going beyond of thinking of your current team environment, how to operate, I think we, and I would hope so, we are becoming much more aware of family situations of people. We are getting much more aware of people's health, because we have this pandemic so much on our face that suddenly where we expected people actually to jump on that call when they were sick, we are much more now giving more space for actual healing. I think we also became much more aware of mental health, because being locked 24/7 in the same environment, especially if you are in a smaller environment, especially if you are by yourself, or if you are with smaller kids, it's just, I think 2020 allowed us to take a step back within our teams, within our organizations, and actually look at each other from much more human point of view. As much as we love technology, now we are using technology to connect with each other. And at least I have seen a lot of that happening within my team, within my organization, coming directly from the top level of leadership. We definitely have much more town halls happening where even from smaller issues are being addressed. And I think 2020 overall was a year of a lot of human change, and I think that will bring us only for the positive.
Yes. So I'm looking for comments from Rinky and Marcia, but maybe a little bit more on has this change impacted your way of handling human risks, like employees dealing with phishing, things like that? Has it changed at all for security postures dealing with human risks?
I think we've been dealing quite well with.
Sorry, Augerte. Sorry, I wanted to throw this question to the other two.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you asked them to wait.
That's all right.
Go ahead.
So since I muted myself, I can start. I think I want to say no. I mean, it's a great question, but I want to say no because I think security has always focused on the human element, right? If you're thinking about a threat actor, you're thinking about their behavior, their motives. If you're thinking about your users, or you're thinking about what do they need, what is their behavior, from what device are they connecting through? Same as our consumers, So I just feel, again, maybe it's easier to talk about it, and it brings more to the forefront for people who are not in the field. But I think we've always been human centric, as Rinky said, really, spot on. It's typically a human error that causes security problems.
That's true.
We've always been on that road.
And Rinky, anything to add here? Do you agree with Marcia's comment about we have always been human centric and this hasn't really changed that much?
What's interesting is when I know this happened to me personally, but I like what Algerda brought up in terms of the mental health pieces. COVID affected mental health of people in ways that I've seen on my own teams, I should say, and just my family members. And it then adds this additional stress that you don't realize in terms of mistakes people might make, or just insider threat type things that might come up from a security perspective. Usually when you're in a workplace, and I miss being around people, and I do not think you can replace that no matter what. I think there's certain things that companies have gotten better about in thinking about how to operate it with a remote workforce, but it does not replace human interaction. And just knowing that you spend most of your day at work, and pre-COVID, you would go into the office, and if you had concerns about something, you might talk to a colleague, and someone might be able to influence you in certain ways. That's not necessarily the case, because Chenshi, as you mentioned, folks now have to be very intentional about scheduling a meeting. And if they're, it's not going to be about, hey, I'm feeling a certain way. And then that may manifest itself into accident, like things that are mistakes at work, and that then becomes insider threat in my opinion. And so I think like thinking about that risk from a security perspective has been huge. So then for me, I think at least with my own team, as much as I can, try to have like transparent conversations. We're always talking about, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling about things today? And I want to just do check-ins. And as you know, that's kind of how conversations start. And the main reason is, you know, I want to make sure people feel like they have an outlet to bring up concerns, so it doesn't manifest itself into you know, inadvertent or intentional insider type cases. And I think I see more leaders, especially really good leaders, doing that more for not just for that reason, but just because they care about their employees.
That's a really interesting point about you know, how some of the things you cannot do in this environment could lead to inadvertent security consequences. So love to have maybe a separate conversation on that. But we are coming to the end of our period time, the allocated time here. So what I want to do is quickly go around the table and give you all very quickly one parting comment about, because our audience are security practitioners. So one thing for them to think about for security, significant security strategy change, maybe, or one security investment they should be thinking about going forward with this new hybrid work environment in mind. So who wants to start? I'll start with you, Rinky. Your mic is unmuted.
Yeah, no, I think the biggest change for me, and I'm very passionate about us bringing diversity into tech and into cybersecurity. And I think keeping your mind open in terms of talent and what you're looking for and where might that be. I think possibilities are endless, and companies have now been enabled to have a global workforce. And so I think that's the big change, and my big thought that that I continue working on is really bringing in that diverse thought leadership so we can solve the biggest cybersecurity challenges that we have. And I think one thing that COVID has enabled us to do is do exactly that.
Fantastic. Marcia? One last comment.
Yeah, I would say, may sound too practical, but if you have not gotten on the Zero Trust train yet, do, because as we go forward, this is going to change, and more remote and users connecting from different places will continue. Make sure you get on that train.
Great. And Algerde?
Amen to you both. And if I can just build, on what Rinky said, people, diversity, inclusion, and taking care of the people that you have, upskilling them, allowing them to grow. Even in this environment, there are plenty of opportunities, and also keeping an open mind in the economical hardships of where might be those pockets where you create the biggest opportunities. And in cybersecurity, the opportunities are limitless.
Well, thank you all so much. I have to say I learned a tremendous amount myself through the conversation today, and thank you all for taking time to be with us. And I'm sure we will get lots of comments and questions from the audience. And I love to continue this conversation off screen. Again, thank you so much.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. we work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon and I'm here now with the Tuesday headlines for you. Up first on Devops.com is an article that likens digital transformation to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. More precisely, the use of low-code and dual-track transformation to make the digital transformation journey an excellent one. It's chock full of Bill and Ted references, which I love because it's one of my favorite movies, but it definitely describes how organizations can tackle their biggest challenges to make what could be a bogus journey into one that is most triumphant. Bill Dorfeld does a great job describing the dual-track approach, which utilizes low-code platforms to increase operational agility, the fast track, while progressing digital transformation initiatives, the slow track, methodically on the side. Implementing a dual-track approach affords great rewards, but it requires an organizational cultural shift. Centers of Excellence can help by evangelizing low-code practices and encouraging citizen development, enabling subject matter experts of lower technical acuity to automate operational workflows and operations. Ultimately, the goal here is to enable organizations to collaborate better and drive better productivity, getting them to where things are, in a word, excellent. We also have an article that looks at the growing use of DevOps in Salesforce environments and how some organizations are finding it not as easy as they perhaps thought. According to a survey of more than 200 IT organizations sponsored by Copedo, which has a DevOps platform for IT teams building custom applications, organizations that have adopted software as a service applications platforms from Salesforce in part to jumpstart their digital business transformation initiatives are experiencing some DevOps growing pains. According to the survey results, 82% have increased or maintained the size of their Salesforce development teams, yet their change fail rate has jumped to 33% in 2020. That was from 23% in the previous year. The survey also noted the time to recover increased to nearly 196 hours in 2020 from 110 hours in 2019. Salesforce is a ubiquitous CRM platform that many of the world's top organizations rely on to do business, and these survey results generally reflect the nature of the more complex application initiatives being launched on top of Salesforce applications. As organizations continue to adjust to the new business realities in the age of COVID-19, there's no doubt more custom applications will be built and deployed on top of SaaS application platforms such as Salesforce. Whether those applications will be built in-house or with the help of a systems integrator or managed services provider to help define their DevOps processes is really up to each organization. But clearly, the current state of DevOps and Salesforce applications needs some work. All right, over on Container Journal, we have a post that looks at the security of APIs and how it's impacting container adoption. That's according to the results of a SALT security report. APIs are hot, with a market that is set to explode, but as they multiply, so do security threats. 91% of organizations experienced an API security incident last year, according to the study. Among the findings, the number of API attacks per month increased by 60% from June to December of last year. Yet 54% of surveyed organizations have only basic security in place for production APIs. Furthermore, 82% of organizations say they are not confident in knowing how much personally identifiable information their endpoints expose. This survey is an eye-opener for organizations using APIs, which are prevalent in cloud-native infrastructures. And this article offers up more than just statistics. It also includes some ways organizations can mitigate API threats. It's definitely an article worth reading in depth. On Security Boulevard, we dive deep into the legal pool with Mark Rash, who asks the question, do information security consultants have a moral, legal, or ethical duty to inquire about their customers' goals and intentions with respect to the services they are providing? This question stems from a recent $500 million fine that McKinsey agreed to pay to various state attorneys general in connection with their role in promoting the sale of addictive opioids to individuals across the country. McKinsey was the consultant to Purdue Pharma, and the fine raises the question of the liability of consultants for the actions of the customers when the customer actually takes their advice. So then, are information security consultants civilly responsible to third parties when they do what the customer asks them to do? Mark goes into the legal, moral, and ethical implications of the case and what it means for the IT sector. And it does mean a lot, in terms of culpability and responsibility. He picks apart the argument that McKinsey was just doing its job in coming up with a strategy to increase opioid sales to existing customers, who essentially were addicts, marketing directly to them and providing incentives to doctors to prescribe the product. The company should have recognized it was essentially aiding and abetting a crime. His advice for IT security consultants: recognize that consulting services are intended to assist a company or organization in achieving its business objectives. If these objectives are good, then the service is good. If the objectives are evil, then the consulting services become evil. Willful blindness doesn't work as a defense. And finally, we have an article that looks at the challenges of IoT asset management and how to overcome them. You know, with the number of IoT devices expected to reach 55.7 billion with a B worldwide by 2025, security teams face increasing complexity and challenges in discovering, managing, and securing all of these assets. Emerging data security and privacy requirements can create further complications. This article takes a closer look at these challenges and some of the best practices around IoT device asset management that can help security teams overcome them. All right, that's all I have for headlines for today. Check back with me on Thursday when I will have a fresh batch for you. Until then, have a great day. Please stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with Ari Weil, who is the Global VP of Product and Industry Marketing at Akamai. Ari, great to see you.
It's nice to be here, Charlene. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me today on TechStrong TV. Let's see. So Akamai's been around for a long time, I know, and you guys have pretty much kind of ruled the content delivery network space for a very, very long time. But I want to talk to you today about edge computing, as I know that it is a topic of discussion that more organizations are having for a number of reasons. Digital transformation is a very, very large reason, but also the pandemic has certainly forced a lot of organizations to kind of move in that direction, and recognizing the amount of data that is involved in digital transformation efforts, and really how do we control all this data and how do we get the most value from it. So interested in hearing from you what you guys are seeing in the edge computing landscape as far as what organizations are kind of seeing, what you're seeing out there as far as organizations in their adoption, and what are some of the pitfalls, and just pretty much anything related to edge computing that you want to share. But maybe we can kind of set the landscape first. Can you tell me a little bit about what you guys are seeing in the edge computing space, and how maybe that is, how it's different from cloud computing? Because I know sometimes organizations kind of get the two mixed up.
Oh, absolutely. So one of my favorite topics to talk about, and certainly a topic of discussion for nearly every one of our customers, in different markets and different verticals. But to sort of, I guess, start to dive in, we've been at the edge for over 20 years. It's something that Akamai has been talking about for some time. But as there's been a rise of cloud and the hyperscaler cloud specifically, so the big three or big four cloud providers that most people are familiar with, businesses have become enamored with this notion of digital transformation and the ease of which they can start to shift their infrastructure to the cloud. There's benefits to not managing hardware, cooling, electricity, all of these things, having resources available to scale on demand. But we've been talking for some time about the need for the edge to complement the cloud. Now, if you look back 20 years, 15, even 10 years ago, most people were thinking about that complementary notion being when I need extreme scale or instant scale, right? Because if I'm in the cloud, I have the ability to provision additional servers, to let those server environments warm up and to start adding workloads to them, but that's not instant scalability. So if I have, a global event that drives everybody to news outlets and digital news outlets to understand what was going on, or if there's a retail holiday or the drop of some new shoe, coat, some piece of apparel, or even, a rush for people to engage on signing up for medical needs, healthcare, insurance, things of that nature, or banking events. All of those require the instantaneous scale that the edge provides. And our CEO has been saying for years that the edge is where all of the capacity is. And it's what'll help businesses actually maintain the highest quality of service for their customers. Now, what we've seen over the last 10 years is people really starting to appreciate standard architectures and implementations for shifting from an on-prem deployment model to a cloud deployment model. And there's efficiencies of scale there. The cloud providers have been adding an awful lot more capabilities so that they can keep people as consistently using their cloud options as they possibly can. So if you're Microsoft, for example, then you'll use an A3 Office 365 implementation to talk about the benefits that the Azure cloud can provide. If you're AWS, similarly, you'll talk about how it is what most SIs in the world know how to deal with. It's the most portable set of skills for application developers and middleware developers. And so you'll try to show how the breadth of capability that is provided on the platform will help people solve more use cases in a consolidated fashion. What we're seeing people now look to the edge for is, how do I gain efficiency, either in realizing time to value faster for my applications, because I don't have to overcome so many of the challenges that latency would impose with a centralized cloud. Or I'm thinking about, I have a multi-cloud model or a hybrid model because some of my infrastructure has to remain on-prem. Others, I might take advantage of the A360 deployment in Azure, whereas I had other apps that I'd already started to deploy to AWS. And now I need consistent security controls across my private and public cloud deployments that might be deployed across multiple clouds, and having consistent security controls at the edge is a benefit. There's a third use case of not just trying to be faster, like by eliminating latencies or deploying my app faster, or applying consistent security. And that's, how is the most efficient model for messaging to whatever I'm messaging to going to be achieved? And that could be publishing and subscribing messages to a connected vehicle, which many people are familiar with that use case, but it could also be changing the architectural model for leaderboards in gaming, or trying to keep information in sync for mobile applications, on-prem displays, and what you might be able to get from the cloud, like when you engage with an airline through an airport ticketing system, mobile application, et cetera. And that's the MQTT messaging protocol, but it's something that is actually allowing you to take multiple endpoints at the edge and fan them into a centralized location through the edge to the cloud, versus what we've been doing for years, which is taking one set of information and fanning it out to a bunch of different consumers at the edge. So if you think about those three use cases, that's typically where we see the most interest with our customers.
Okay. All right, great. And I can imagine that obviously cost or economics play a huge role in determining the extent to which organizations are adopting edge computing services. I know, latency has always been kind of a big selling point of the edge. If you have more data processed at the edge, latency is, obviously reduced because you don't have that data traveling back and forth from the main core, the infrastructure, and then back out to the edge device for processing. But there's got to be a cost conversation there as well. So what is it that you guys are hearing with relation to economics and edge computing? I mean, are there certain things that organizations need to keep in mind and consider as they're determining what data should go to the edge and what data should remain within the infrastructure?
Absolutely. I mean, right now, I would look at the maturity of the edge computing space for most enterprises as, if we just use normal life cycle terminology for a person, maybe we're at the tween phase. So we're not quite a teenager, but we're bigger than a toddler. We're thinking about digital transformation and trying to align that to a set of reasonable architectural changes that businesses are pursuing. They've got their arms around certain things. Like if you want to do, engage with an e-commerce application and storefront, now there are very well established software as a service, platform as a service implementations that are specific to that sort of use case. Marketing clouds are getting to be similar in that sense. But if we think about what a business is trying to achieve, let's say if they have an application that has some personally identifiable information or regulated information, some publicly available information, and then their endpoints or their ways that people access that information are done across websites, mobile apps, and connected devices. There isn't really an established reference architecture for the right way to do that. And so, yes, latency is one driver where you can say it's unacceptable for one of the services in my user experience which is not going to result in a page loading taking 500 milliseconds. An example of that would be if I want to engage with your website and something about where I am will dictate the content that I see. Some service has to execute to process where I am relative to that content. If that service is hosted in the cloud, I am now going to have the latency of going to the cloud, processing that information, and coming back to my device implemented on top of whatever else has to happen in the app for me to experience that content. So if you think about a microservice architecture where you have anywhere from 5 to maybe even 50 little microservices that have to execute, that could be a lot of latency. But we can think about other things. If I have data that changes frequently, then why would I manage that data in the cloud where I'm paying for every request and compute and response that goes out of wherever that data is held? And then because I'm assembling it through a number of services in the cloud, not only am I getting charged for ingress to the database and cloud data center and then egress out of it, I'm also paying for all of the migress, the conversations between services in the cloud and all of the compute that they would impose as part of processing. So there's a lot for businesses to really understand, and that requires maturity of their architectural deployment in the cloud so that they can see how much it costs them, so they can understand what that flow of data is and where they're incurring these costs before they start to think about offloading that cost to the edge. But what we've seen with some of our customers is even for, let's say, an API call to a microservice that would identify a user's location, if we were to cache that response for the user at the edge, so an API call, which is a very small amount of data, for even 500 milliseconds or a second, the offload to the cloud is significant, and that is immediately visible in your bill at the end of the month when you extrapolate that to the scale of users that request that information. So one thing is if you have lightweight data that changes very frequently where you need low latency, then thinking about the edge is a really valid use case. Another one is if you can buy a software as a service implementation of a security control, whether that be an application firewall or an application delivery controller that controls how information gets routed to applications, or maybe a bot management solution that will identify if this is a human or a robot. If all of that processing can happen at the edge, and then you determine if this thing trying to gain access to my application or my data is valid, then arguably you have less information that is requested in general, because a lot of stuff on a website is going to be search engine robots, or if it's a retail company or a travel company, it's going to be a scraper bot, either scraping inventory or trying to actually pursue like an account takeover sort of a transaction to get data out of your system. But if you can stop that at the edge, you have better offload, you have better responsiveness, and the edge actually has better visibility across all of the different devices and IP addresses that are trying to access your data. So you get the benefit of not only the scale and the immediate processing at the edge, but also that you're not paying for any of that traffic or computing power at your cloud. The one use case that is the hardest for most people to get their arms around at scale is the highly verticalized use case, where we're seeing things like artificial intelligence really and truly being applied. So if I'm, for example, there's a use case out there right now that Amazon is touting for their Wavelengths initiative, which is a business that was looking to augment the patient experience when they were actually getting a scan by the doctor. Now, AI can run a bunch of models at the edge, actually in that location where the user is getting scanned, and it will augment what the healthcare provider is actually doing by providing computational horsepower basically in real time so that you can improve the efficacy of that scan. If you were to have to send all that information back to the cloud and process it using machine learning in the cloud, it would be very latent and very expensive and require you to maintain a lot of hardware. Whereas if you were to do all that at the edge with sophisticated algorithms and artificial intelligence, the patient experience is better, the medical practitioner is more effective, and your cost is greatly diminished. But those highly verticalized use cases are really the hardest ones to identify and really the most capitally intensive to prove out. And so for the majority of businesses, what we see is them just looking to extend their normal horizontal cloud-based deployments to the edge.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes a whole lot of sense now for the market today. But do you think in the future that's going to be changing? Do you see maybe a greater application of edge computing as organizations, not only kind of scale up, but also maybe add that level of intelligence to their applications?
Oh, absolutely. I think once we establish some consistent use cases and consistent patterns, as happens with sort of any emerging technology or hyped technology, there will be sort of a normalization phase that we go through. We'll see startups getting consolidated. We'll see probably a lot of acquisitions over the course of the next 3 years by the main hypervisor or hyperscaler cloud providers. And we'll start to see some real patterns emerging for where edge computing and then specific applications of machine learning and artificial intelligence at the edge start to become more commonplace. We saw that back when cloudlets were being developed or when web application firewalls were moving from appliances to cloud native services. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're going to see the same thing over the course of the next 3 years because the investment's there. We're starting to see the shift of what was a year ago, 10% of enterprise data being deployed at the edge to now moving very quickly towards a 50% of all of that data being processed at the edge. And that's as people get comfortable with actually the regulatory environments allowing it, comfort with the efficacy of actually processing data, and then of course the economics, to your point, of it becoming more economical because not only are the services something that they can consume more economically, but they have the staff and the expertise to actually operate and maintain them over time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I really do think that we're going to see a lot more happening and we're going to be having a lot more conversations about edge computing in general as the next few years unfold. And we really do see the market in general advance, certainly the technology advance beyond what it is today. And to your point, as we see more acquisitions occur and those trends start to emerge. Ari, thank you so much for your time and your expertise, kind of walking me through the edge computing landscape as it is today, and hopefully giving us a little glimpse into what is to come. So thanks again. I appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thank you.
All right, great. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon and I'm here now with the Tuesday edition of the webinars previews. As always, we have so many great webinars coming up on devops.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Here are 3 that are coming up very quickly in the hopes that you can mark your calendar and perhaps attend. The first one is called Spinnaker and Speedboats, CI/CD at Scale. It is happening Wednesday, February 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Devops.com, and it's sponsored by Harness. This webinar takes a look at how an organization has gone through the journey of implementing and leveraging Spinnaker, starting from its migration from a homegrown deployment solution. As its demands have increased from an Amazon ECS to Kubernetes, we'll hear about what has worked well and what the challenges have been. So some of the key takeaways will include the journey from a homegrown solution to a continuous delivery platform, the overview, fundamentals, and potential challenges with Spinnaker, and cloud-native pipelines that can now be built in minutes, empowering developers. Good stuff there. The second one is also happening Wednesday, February 17th. This one is at 3 p.m. and it is called Finding and Preventing Secrets in Code. This one is sponsored by Blue Bracket. It's on devops.com as well. This webinar will examine how hackers look for and find secrets in code and show how to prevent them from leaking in the first place using DevOps. Key takeaways for this webinar will include how to find and prevent secrets in codes of all types, how to shift security left and arm developers with the tools to prevent secrets in code, how to use free tools for robust and scalable secrets detection, and how to integrate them into your CI/CD pipeline, and oh, so much more. So please check this one out. It's a good one. Finally, today we have Who's in Your Cloud? The Case for Visibility in DevOps. This one is happening Thursday, February 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern on devops.com. It's sponsored by Ops Compass. This webinar focuses on security technology from Ops Compass that provides a level of visibility to DevOps teams to improve security. And without proper visibility, intelligence, and control, there can be no control or information about misconfigurations. So the free tier of Ops Compass Pro application, which is built specifically for DevOps engineers and cloud architects, provides that single pane of glass that provides a 360-degree view to establish and maintain a healthy cloud environment. Good stuff. So this webinar will show attendees how to reduce the risk of a security breach, reestablish complete control of your infrastructure, discover and reduce unknown and unnecessary costs, and gain immediate visibility of all cloud assets on a single pane of glass to observe drift from a baseline. All right, so many good webinars we have on the sites. I hope you can join me for one or all of them. Meanwhile, check back with me on Thursday when I will have a brand spanking new batch for you of webinars previews. And until then, have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with George Burns III, who is Senior Consultant at Cloud Operations at SPR. George, thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Charlene, thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about SPR.
SPR, we are a technology innovation firm located downtown Chicago. We're right in the loop. We focus on existing app modernization and new app development. We have a great environment. We take a great approach towards client engagement. We really focus on engaging with the client more than on just a functional level, more than just a developmental level, but we really try to understand the core of your business, deliver the best work that we can. And one of our tenets that we try to hold really strong to is delivering beyond the build. So we don't just say, here's your software, you're going to need to find someone to support it and walk away. We like to build a partnership with the companies and the firms that we're engaging with so that we can work together to solve your problems, not just now, but in the future as well.
Perfect. Be interested in finding out what you guys have seen over the last, say, 9 or 10 months as the pandemic hit, and so many organizations were shifting their operations to the cloud, either in part or large swaths of it, maybe even all of their operations and their workloads. Do you think that those organizations who did move very quickly to adopt the cloud in light of the pandemic, do you think that They did a good job. I mean, do you think that they were really as prepared as they should have been or could have been?
I mean, I think we have to remember that, we can only be as prepared for a pandemic as we can anticipate. And I think that this was a good fire drill for a lot of us in that we realize technology is changing the way that not only firms like ours, operate tech firms, technology is changing the way we all operate. And the cloud has been a large part of that enablement. But during the COVID fire drill, where we really focused on really delivering apps to our clients, delivering content to our clients, bringing our employees, bringing our staff online, getting everyone the resources that they need, that was all results driven. That was not focused on solving a problem, creating a new opportunity. That was really focused on keeping the doors open, earning money, keeping our clients. So when we step into an engagement like that, we take a very different approach. That's a fire drill. We walk in and say, okay, we're just going to stop this. We're going to make sure that you can get everything working that you need to, and we're going to walk away. And then we need to take a step back and say, what did we do? What problems did we create that we have to fix now? What problems did we create that we're going to have to put on the list to attack later? That's the tech debt component of of engagements. But we did do some things right. So for a lot of companies, you're going to take a look back. You're going to take an inventory of what you did during this time, and you're going to say, hey, really, we wouldn't normally have done it this way, but because we were in this situation, that didn't work out so poorly. That maybe we could have done A, B, C differently. Had we had the foresight to have known how we would have to adapt our business to meet the needs of the marketplace as they were. But I really think for the most part, most of the clients that we've engaged with, I mean, we had a couple months where everybody needed to get everything done right now, and we were the same way. Being consultants, we're used to a little bit more of a remote environment. A lot of us tend to work remotely. So I think, we didn't have the growing pains of, I need to set up my office at home, carrying monitors off, down the elevator on your last day in the office. We didn't really have that. So we not only came into these engagements during the COVID craze with the work from home, distributed workforce, remote working experience, but we also came in with our development knowledge, with everything else that we do really well. We came in, so we were prepared to address your technical needs and maybe help you better understand the environment to which you're entering, which gave us a unique way to engage with some of our clients, and that they really, I talked about how we like to build relationships, and that was one of those moments where we were really able to build a relationship on a different level that benefited us and our clients.
So with that in mind, though, I mean, as you were working with clients to shift over to the cloud, I mean, cloud migration is a big job, even in the best circumstances. Given the circumstances, did you guys notice that there was a lot of technical debt that was accumulating as these organizations did kind of rush to the cloud? And are we now kind of, as the pandemic has worn on and organizations are kind of maybe shifting to a hybrid environment, maybe going back to work full time or part of the time, are these things now that you guys are going to have to go back, and organizations as well, go back and address later on? I mean, did they inadvertently create a whole lot of problems that they now have to go back and fix?
At least in my experience so far, I think, we've had a couple clients that did create problems for themselves. Mostly unintentionally. It was, I need to get everybody working remotely, and I just need to make that happen. So scaffold that up and make that happen. But in order to understand what we did wrong, I think it would be beneficial for a lot of us to compare what we did during the COVID engagements to how we normally engage. The difference there is, in a normal engagement, we take a very DevOps style approach. That's us. That's a lot of firms. That's a lot of development firms. It's tech firms, non-tech firms. DevOps has become a cycle through which a lot of us operate. And the DevOps cycle is 100% dependent on iteration. So we break deliverables down into their most consumable components. So we try to take these giant pie in the sky ideas and divide them up into 100 individually digestible stories, or a couple hundred individually digestible stories. And each of those stories gives us what the user wants or what the system wants, and what we can say, our testing criteria to say, yes, this worked, yes, this did not work, we can move on, we can go forward. That DevOps approach, that iteration is so important to how we operate, how most tech shops do operate. We don't like to make giant changes anymore. We don't like to push out quarterly updates, or we don't like to do this wide change everything all at once. Let's make these little changes. Let's go back to making these little changes. Let's go back to identifying the root problem. Let's workshop around the solution, as opposed to coming in and saying, we just need to get everything to work better so that our employees can work from home. We need to go back to what we're good at, which is workshopping ideas, incrementalism, and giving users what they want on a continually deliverable cycle, so that instead of giving you all of these updates at once that may or may not work. I mean, every update, we could test and test and test, but sometimes you're just not going to have the test is not going to perfectly mirror what the production experience looks like. Yeah. So we need to get back into iteration and stop trying to, solve the world right now and just focus on one problem at a time.
Yeah, I think now that the chaos has kind of, come down a little bit, and organizations are pretty much where they need to be, but both to address the immediate issues and the long-term issues associated with work from home, or a workforce that is, in all probability, never going to be going back into an office full time. I firmly, I agree absolutely with you that, iteration is the way to address a lot of the issues that organizations are facing now and in the future. I also believe that DevOps is playing a crucial role with a lot of organizations in being able to address those issues. Do you see that maybe what happened with the pandemic is perhaps maybe has changed the minds of certain organizations regarding implementing DevOps practices and taking that more kind of DevOps philosophy, if you will, for lack of a better term? I mean, are they now believers?
Using my own recent experience, I will say yes. I will say that more people are interested on a retrospective look back on what they have done over the last year, maybe two at this point. And most organizations that we've engaged with are really looking to get back to iteration. We are looking to get back to, let's make small changes at frequent intervals that we can keep up with, that our operations folks can keep up with, that our support folks can keep up, that our staff isn't going to mutiny against as we change everything over the course of one day or 1 week or 1 month again. So it's really, we need to take a stock of where we are. That does not just, we're not limiting ourselves to our technical environment. I mean, our technical environment is only as good as the users that we have using it. So if we haven't shown our users how our business must operate in this new normal, then maybe the solution isn't go right back into development. Maybe we need to take a step back. Maybe we need to re-engage our users internally to help them better understand what we're doing. Communication, the DevOps model, well, a lot of us in tech, a lot of us in development, we take it for granted. The fact that, every morning we have a 15-minute meeting with our entire group and we all say what we're working on, we say what our blockers are. And it may seem repetitive sometimes to those of us that do it every day, but it's super important. Even if I just sit there and say, Donna's doing this, Chris is doing this, Letha's doing this. Okay, I know where everybody is today. That just gives me the lay of the land. And we take that for granted. We take for granted that free-flowing exchange of information within our daily workflow. And those of us that are in tech, we often take for granted our technical aptitude and don't consider the technical aptitude of our user set sufficiently enough to create the results that they need to operate, at their 100% level. So taking the time to workshop your ideas, understand the user experience a little bit more, if that has been something that significantly changed. If not, identify what's significantly changing your environment and really try to get operational feedback from your users that points you in the direction you need to go.
Do you think that because of that we actually might see the pace or the rate of change that occurred in the last 9 months? Do you think we might see that pace actually kind of keep up as we go forward? Not necessarily to make sure that, to your point, that the lights stay on, that we keep the user experience top notch, but just because that's kind of the way we expect things to happen now.
I think we're probably going to meet somewhere in the middle. Whenever we make a big change and overcorrect, I think meeting in the middle is not only the most pragmatic approach going forward as we step into recovery, but it also is going to invoke the least amount of stress on people involved in the process. So those of us in IT, we've had a long 9 months. We've had a long 10 months. We've been working really hard for a while. And while everyone thinks, hey, progress at this speed is amazing, sometimes we need to give our people a break. So I'm not speaking specifically for us. Consulting is a little different than corporate IT. Corporate IT, these corporate IT departments are right now demanding so much out of some of their resources that the consulting side of the business where I operate, we come in, we're able to solve problems for companies. We're able to give our insight, give our knowledge, skill set, people. We're able to let people borrow those, basically. That's our business model. And when you work with a provider that then gives you those people and then takes them all away at the end, you're back to, okay, well, now we're supporting something that maybe we don't know enough about. So maintaining a relationship with, whatever consulting firm you're working with, if you're not working with a consulting firm, then the business relationship with internal IT is going to be crucial. And it's all about communication. And I said before, in the DevOps model, we take the daily stand-up for granted sometimes, but 15 minutes shapes my day. Everything can change in those 15 minutes. If someone says, I have a huge problem and now we cannot accomplish X, if I'm now blocked by that, I need to help them figure out what their problem is so that I can move forward. So communication not only helps allocate or resources be allocated correctly, it also helps us to self-allocate a little bit. So we need to be able to communicate effectively within our teams. We need to be able to communicate effectively within our organizations. But as far as, do we think development will continue at this pace? Some things yes, some things no. I mean, not everybody wants everything to change this quickly all the time. I think we were blessed in this period in that most users understand, like, if we don't do this, no one can work. So the needs of the organization right now supersede the needs of the individual. We've passed that. So now we can maybe focus a little more on individual needs, and we can go back and correct some of these areas where we cut a corner in order to make something happen that we needed to happen as an organization.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. And I agree with you that, certain things don't need to continue to operate at breakneck speed. But I also believe that now that we do understand that, it maybe doesn't take 6 months to get a particular project done when it's been proven now that it could be done in 3 weeks. I think people in general are going to have take a much they're going to look at new projects through a much smaller lens because they understand that the faster things move, then less technical debt is accrued, and certainly that's it's doable and it can be done correctly. So. Yeah,
and I think iteration is important there. When we made these swathing changes, these overarching changes, it may not have felt iterative, but we were really only doing what had to be done to meet the end that the organization needed.
Right.
So while large, still, iterative in its foundational properties, but we need to get back to that traditional way of thinking about project engagement.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've done the fire drill, to your point, and hopefully things will start.
I'm sure we'll have another one in a few years that we don't know what it's going to be about, but we're going to look back on this time and say, look what we learned during COVID, and we can next time assume that we can take on less debt because we can learn from our mistakes.
Perfect. Yep. I agree. 100%. George, thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I think it's definitely food for thought for organizations as they're maybe kind of taking a look back on what they have accomplished over the last 10 months and say, you know what, maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought it was, or maybe we're not, as in debt technically as we thought we were. So good stuff.
For my organization, we did some great things during 2020. We published some great content. We had some great engagement with our clients. I welcome everyone to go check out our website, www.spr.com, see what we do. And we'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for your time today, Charlene.
Great. Thank you, George. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Devops.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. Devops.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. Devops.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. Devops.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, everybody, that's a wrap for today's TechStrong TV broadcast. I hope everybody enjoyed today's conversations. I know I certainly did. We will be back on Thursday with a brand new episode and lots of other great conversations from folks in the tech space. I hope everybody will take some time and join us. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day. And as always, please stay safe.